Broadcast now.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Audit and Governance Committee, BCP Council, on Thursday, the 27th of February 2024. My name is Councillor Marcus Andrews. I will be chairing the meeting this evening. Before we actually go to the actual agenda items, can I refer to the Democratic Services Officer to read out the housekeeping announcements? Thank you.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the front of this car park, the car park at the front of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off mics and turning down the volume completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Item 1, do we have any apologies this evening, please?
Thank you. I've received an apology from Councillor Philip Broadhead on local government business.
And linking in with that, any substitutes?
No substitutes.
Okay. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations reported to you so far?
None received.
Okay, if any members in the room this evening have anything to declare. Councillor Tarley.
Sorry, it's not a declaration of interest, but I do believe that Councillor Waite is probably still trying to make their way here, but there's been traffic issues, so I'm sure I haven't been asked to send apologies, but just to make that aware for the record. Thanks.
Yes, I think another councillor got delayed in the traffic, but okay. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. The last meeting was held fairly recently on the 27th of January 2025 and it has already been circulated. Can I have a proposer and indeed a seconder to confirm the acceptance of the minutes? Councillor Armstrong?
It was just to make a point, actually. There was, sorry, I haven't got my minutes up at the moment, but I think it was point 63 or point 64. It was just to ask, actually, to be named in the discussion with regards to divestment and ethical investing. Thank you.
So, Chair, I'm just happy to comment on that. We don't normally name individual members in raising points during the debate. I think at one point I've named a member because there was an action which followed from that. That's just the sort of council style, how we do our minutes. So if you want to sort of raise that outside of the meeting, perhaps, just to sort of comment on the minutes if you'd like to see a change.
Okay. Any other queries, or can I have a proposer and a seconder? The Vice Chairman is proposing. Councillor Tarling is indicating he's going to second.
Unfortunately, I can't second. I wasn't in attendance for the whole meeting. However, I was virtually there for half the meeting, but I don't think I can second on the basis.
I think virtual attendance, you were effectively attending the meeting, although you couldn't vote at that meeting, but you can vote at this meeting. So we can accept the minutes. Thank you.
Everyone's agreed.
Anybody dissenting?
No, not dissenting.
No, but you weren't present. No. Okay.
So everyone's agreed.
Fine, that's accepted. Thank you very much for that. So therefore we move on to item 5, public issues. Do we have any public questions to start with?
We do, Chair. We have a public question from Mr. Philip Gattrell, and Mr. Alex McKinstry is here today to read it out on his behalf.
Thank you. And I think this question is effectively in 3 parts. There's a preamble. So I think for clarity and help to understand the questions with the responses, we can deal with those 3 questions and my answers one by one. But if you could, Mr. McKinstry, on behalf of Mr. Gattrell, do the preamble first, please.
Great pleasure. Good evening, Councillor Andrews. Subject: accounting for the Council's IT and other equipment comprising laptop computers, mobile tablet computing devices including iPads, smartphones including iPhones, and basic cellular phones. Background: an earlier year's response to my Section 26 Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014 request stated the above items were not treated as fixed assets because they were below de minimis capitalisation thresholds. The overdue 2023 to 24 response to my associated request for the essential inventory states not a document that exists, implying that such equipment is now capitalised. Question in integral elements. Firstly, are the above defined items recorded individually as fixed assets in the accounting records, Oracle Fusion or otherwise, including details of their users? And what is their cumulative acquisition cost at 31st of March 2024?
Okay, thank you for that first question. The response is no. Individual records of these assets are not kept as part of the accounting records. Details of IT and other equipment are held within the asset management system managed by IT services. The acquisition cost for 2023-24 capitalised was, and we're going down to the pennies here, £888,304.80. And your second question.
What by description, total number and acquisition cost were such items not capitalised but written off to revenue in 2023 to 2024?
The answer is 0.
Okay, and the third and final question from Mr. Gattrell. What is the resale policy regarding all such equipment disposals?
Okay, BCP Council does not directly resell equipment to BCP employees. All equipment disposals are managed through our contract with an IT asset disposal provider, ensuring sustainability and compliance with GDPR and WEEE regulations. Now, I've got the translations for those abbreviations if you want. The first one is General Data Protection Regulation, and the second one is Waste, Electrical and Equipment Regulations. Thank you. And that's the only question, I believe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So moving on, I think have we got any statements?
Yes, Chair, we've got 2 public statements from Mr. Gattrell. Again, Mr. McKinstry is kindly going to read those on his behalf.
Okay, over to you again, sir.
Okay, first statement for Mr. Gattrell. Fixed assets adjustments affecting 2023 to 24 not disclosed as restated in successive statements of accounts. Final 2021 to 2022 altered by reduction in final 2022 to 3, and the adjustments there are other land and buildings £7,685,000, vehicles, plant, equipment £25,000. Final 2022 to 23 altered by increase in revised draft for 2023 to 24, dated January the 27th, 2025. Adjustment there, other land and buildings, £14,162,000. Notwithstanding any incomplete audit work, these examples reflect unacceptable departures from conventional practice, including prior year's figures altered only within the columnar fixed asset notes. Although the comparative summary notes extracting infrastructure assets misleadingly match the prior year's balance sheet figures. Consequently, alterations are neither flagged nor explained. Discrepancies when net book value figures brought forward disagree with the comparative carried forward figures for the prior year shown within the same columnar note. Miscasts due to failure to round certain £1,000 figures consistently, thus generating unnecessary reconciliation differences. And 31st of March 2024, group balance sheet headers incorrectly state sequentially 31.3.22 and 31.3.23, not 31.3.23 and 31.3.24. There ends Mr. Gattrell's first statement. The second is as follows. Agency recruited officers contravention of the status determination statement of payroll rules. This matter also falls within the external auditor's remit when considering council's compliance with the law and potential liabilities. In 2024, I identified and notified officers regarding the breach which cannot be underestimated. It is underscored by the Chancellor's statement on increasing vigilance and penalties concerning a recognised area of systemic abuse. The Council's officers have acknowledged consistent failure to execute the correct processes. It is, however, impossible for the Council to know with certainty whether all agencies in a chain have complied with the rules, meaning that automatically tax and national insurance due fall as a liability on the Council at escalating interest rates, with the risk of additional severe penalties determined by non-disclosure and deemed level of culpability. The Council's appropriate officers have doubtless now ensured full disclosure to His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Philip Gattrell, 26th of February 2025.
Thank you for that. And that, I think, completes the statements. There's no petitions.
Chair, just to clarify, those were in relation to agenda item 8. Thank you. Statement of accounts.
Thank you for that. We now move on to item 6 on the agenda. Can I actually, at this point, ask Councillor Stephen Bartlett if you want to perhaps come up to the table, because I think you may want to help present this next item. I'll give the preamble here. So item 6 is a recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny Board that was held on the 3rd of February 2025. At that meeting, the ONS Board agreed the following recommendation to A&G Committee relating to the agenda item on the budget and medium-term financial plan. And the resolution of ONS Board recommended that A&G Governance Committee instigate an investigation on the Castles Quay development. So, Councillor Bartlett, could you give us some background to this, please, so the committee members can consider this matter? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's a bit of a potted history. I think it might be worth just going over the history of the Castles Quay, just very, very briefly, and I will be brief. I won't say anything about the development itself. I think we're probably all aware of the development that's in Poole. It was going to be a major development. And on the 23rd of August, a paper was presented, 2021, an OS paper was presented to the ONS board on Castles Quay, which was the procurement of the development. And then on the 1st of September 2021, a paper was presented to Cabinet, which approved that purchase. And then again on the 19th of September, the paper was presented to full council, which approved the purchase. On the 4th of November 2022, the contract was let to Inland Homes for the purchase of the development. And in shortly after, in February 2023, there seemed to be a development of problems occurring on the site. There were problems reported with Inland Homes as a company, and this was then started to filter out in the public domain. And then in July, Homes 2023, Inland Homes suggested a renegotiation of its contract with the council, resulting from market conditions and other difficulties that they were facing at the time. Around October 2023, the public started reporting materials being removed from the site. I was contacted personally by people reporting that materials, trucks are coming along just taking materials away, and that prompted me to request an item on the Overview and Scrutiny Board to find out what was going on, because we didn't really know. And so on the 9th of October 2023, we had a report presented to outline what the situation was and what the process was going forward. And it was coincident, in fact, that on the 9th of October 2023 that Inland Homes was formally went into administration It was coincident with the day of the overviewed scrutiny board. Then, since then, we've not really heard too much about it. We know it's been dealt with by the council and the administrator, and there's negotiations been going on. But then on the 3rd of February this year, 2025, at Appendix 10 to the budget report, the Chief Financial Officer Section 5 report highlighted the risk to the council of this particular project. And the risk was that the council may choose to pay off the debt associated with the amount already incurred, which is £15.3 million. So at this point, this is getting really serious. And I have to say that, you know, going back to the original ONS sort of look at the situation, we had a degree of reassurance that the site or the council's interests were protected adequately through the charge against the title registered with the land registry, and so its protection was there. But the report from the Chief Financial Officer seemed to put a new emphasis on that particular issue. And the fact remains that, you know, it's been quite some time now. The land has not been released to the council, and in combination with the risk highlighted by Chief Financial Officer, we believed that there was cause to raise an investigation to look into this. Now, we were conscious that the Corporate Risk Register is overseen by the Audit and Governance Committee, and we felt that that was the appropriate place for this to be looked at for that reason. There are some obvious questions that come out of this, and I just put them to you just as suggestions, and I'll be very quick about this. Some of the things that need to be looked at is clearly, and the idea is, of course, is to what lessons do we need to learn, if any, and how can we prevent this from happening again, if indeed there's anything we can do that to prevent this sort of thing happening in the future. But basically, you know, how did we actually, as a council, get into this situation? How did the opportunity arise, and what parties were involved in initiating the purchase? Why, and this is a really important one, why did we pay for the land up front? This was not made clear on any of the reports presented to ONS, the Cabinet or the Council when the original purchase was initiated. That payment was described as advance payment and a deposit in all the reports. I can't recall ever seeing anything in a report that said this was the purchase of the land, upfront purchase of the land. So that then goes into what level of due diligence was carried out on Inland Homes, and should this have revealed the financial difficulties they were in? Was the usual due diligence process bypassed, and if so, why was it? Was there any corporate knowledge of what was occurring with Inland Homes, and if we did we react fast enough? Did the council have the requisite internal skills to broker this deal? What role and influences did Future Places have in negotiating the deal? Because they were certainly part of it at the time. And then, last of all, were there any political pressures exerted on officers? And could this have affected the procurement process? Now, these are just a little brain dump that I've thought about today. There will be a whole raft of other issues, I'm sure. But I think through the nature of the questions and the nature of the situation, the risk imposed to the council does warrant an investigation, and that's why we put it to A&G. It's up to you. It's your decision, and it's how you conduct it. If you decide to go with it, how you conduct it. That's why we didn't want to be too prescriptive in our recommendation to you. We felt that it's up to this committee to decide if they wanted an investigation and how they would conduct it, if indeed you deem it necessary. So with that, Chair, I'll close it, and I'm here to answer any questions if you wish to, but back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think what I want to do, and I think what we need to do, the monitoring officer isn't physically in the room this evening, but Janie Berry is joining us online to get some advice from her on this, because it is, as Councillor Bartlett has mentioned, in terms of the ticket price, a very important matter. And Janie Berry, are you able to sort of give your comments and advice as to how this committee should consider this request from ONS committee, please?
Yes, and thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Bartlett as well for his helpful list of potential questions to be addressed, as I was unsure of the reasoning around the overview and scrutiny's request for this investigation. I have to say, committee, that I think that it may be too premature for the committee to just consider this at this moment in time. As already been alluded to, the council is in dialogue with the administrators, and specialist insolvency practitioners have been appointed to robustly protect the council's interests and seek the best outcomes for BCP Council. I'm very reluctant to support any activity at the moment which may undermine or frustrate that activity being undertaken by our advisors. I am slightly reluctant to support this request for an investigation. Having just considered right now the list of questions that Councillor Bartlett's putting forward, I'm also unsure as to whether Audit and Governance Committee is the correct committee to undertake the scope of this entire piece of work. Ordinarily, the role of Audit and Governance Committee is to seek assurance, and it would potentially ask others, such as, for example, an Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to undertake elements of this work that is being suggested. And it's for Audit and Governance Committee then to check that the lessons learned are in place and that the council doesn't find itself in this position future down the line. Therefore, Chairman, in summary, I'm just unable to support this request at this moment in time because I have to act in the best interest of the council as the council's chief legal officer, and I really do not want to undermine anything which is underway at the moment in the dialogue between the administrators and the council's appointed insolvency practitioners. Thank you.
Thank you for that. What Councillor Bartlett has said has largely appeared in the media already over the past 2 or 3 years. You've brought it together and summarised it for us. I don't want to have a big debate and discussion on this, but I will give members an opportunity to make some comments, having noted what the monitoring officer has said to us. I've got Councillor Tarling indicating first.
Thank you, Chair. I was on overview and scrutiny, I think, when this came up, first time round, and I do welcome the fact that overview and scrutiny and now this committee are keeping a hold on this issue because it's very important. And I think that my first recollection on overview and scrutiny was that the council's position was protected by virtue of the fact that we had a charge on the property. One would think that we would probably not have a charge on the property if we hadn't have paid for that charge and effectively bought the land. However, I share Councillor Bartlett's concern here that it's a lot of money, and does that charge effectively cover us financially? Should the administration not come down in our favour? And it is a pure risk item. Is if there's sufficient coverage in that charge and value in the land that if we paid 15 odd million towards the value of the land, is it worth that? Are there other charges on the land, other claims? I'm very pleased to hear from Ms. Berry that we engaged specialist insolvency practitioners. This is very difficult work to do. Are you at liberty to tell us who's been engaged to do this work at this stage?
I'd rather not. I can advise you outside of the meeting if that's acceptable.
Yeah, I'm happy if that's
just because we're in the finalisation of the instructions. So
okay, fair enough.
I just want to make sure it's all confirmed. And I can advise the members outside of this committee once that is completed, which should be this week.
It's commercially confidential. That's fine. I understand that. That's a valid reason to not tell us. But obviously, when that appointment's made and we've actually engaged, special advice, this committee has a right to know who we're employing to do that. So, thank you. I take on board very much the point, and I recognise the sensitivity, the fact we're negotiating with the insolvency, well, the liquidators or administrators of inland homes. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Phipps, you indicated.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I am of the opinion that we should actually do something about this and have a look at this one way or another, albeit whether it is us or it is overview and scrutiny. This is an audit and certainly a governance issue as far as I'm concerned. I appreciate as well what you're saying about the word that Michael has just come up with, sensitivity. But by the time anything comes through this committee or the committee system, it's certainly not going to be frustrating what is going on at the moment because things take so long to get through the system. So I do believe that we should actually make a resolution this evening to be looking at this. At the end of the day, this council has paid out £15 million for what, you know, for a structure or part of, or some works on a land that we don't even own. How on earth did that happen? This company has gone into administration where any credit checks done on it. I believe you asked a question actually at council in July 23, Councillor Andrews, to ask if there were any additional credit checks were done on the development company, and the answer was no. So if they had been done, apparently this company was already trading at a loss, and you would have seen the situation with the company at the time, and maybe we would have thought twice about investing money in something. In this, it also looked as though we were told we had a charge on the land, so there was no risk, it was okay, but actually that's not the case. There's a lot to look at here, and I don't think we can just brush it under the carpet like that. And I really do think that we need to make some sort of resolution this evening to look at this, albeit it be us, overview and scrutiny, or actually something independently, maybe. But I open it up to others now because that is what I think. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Connolly, Vice Chair.
Other one, sorry. I have one comment and a suggestion. So my first comment is, I think we talked about this at the last meeting, about there might be a little bit of a gap in between what's appropriate for A&G to look at and what's appropriate for ONS to look at, specifically with respect to ongoing projects. I remember Councillor Cox, you said it was a good point made. And perhaps a bit of a gap in the scrutiny councillors have for these live projects. I don't think it quite sits with the traditional backward-looking assurance work of A&G because it's ongoing, but equally it may not sit with ONS. So what I would think would be helpful is, I know that that Nigel Sandlard is doing some work on our assurance framework, which is going to come to us, I think, at the next meeting or one of the next meetings. So at that point, it might be useful for us to talk a little bit about how we have scrutiny of ongoing live projects and whether we're comfortable with that. I think that might be a useful thing to talk about, stepping back from this for a minute. On this specific case, I think it definitely needs to be looked at, obviously. My suggestion would be that we do, instead of a specific investigation into Carter's Quay, we do an investigation, or we look as an A&G at the council's processes around regeneration projects, with a deep dive into what can be learnt from Carter's Quay. So the reason for suggesting that is, do you remember the Bayside review investigation we looked at the year before last? It was a very good investigation, very thorough, but an awful lot had moved on by the time we looked at it. And so it wasn't necessarily clear to me to see that the lessons learned have been implemented straight away, because it was sort of a bit like everything's changed since then. So what I'd be worried about with Carter's Quay is if we looked at it and the answer was, what are the lessons learned? Well, the answer is, well, everything's changed, we've refreshed everything. So maybe what instead would be useful would be to look at what are the processes now, and can we have a specific look at whether or not Carter's Quay, such instance, could be avoided, as a question within that. So I'm just proposing that to see what others think about that.
So you said the phrase suggestion, but you concluded with the word propose. Have you got a proposal to make?
Yeah, I propose that we put that on the work plan for the coming year, that there be a specific A&G piece of work on the council's processes and governance around regeneration projects in the round. So that's forward looking about how we do them now, how we do them all, and with a specific deep dive on making sure that any lessons that can be learnt from Carter's Key have been baked into the current processes. So it's still an investigation into Carter's Key, but with a slightly different shift in focus to be more forward looking.
Okay, Councillor Armstrong?
I think I'm more inclined to sit with Councillor Phipps actually in terms of us having some kind of independent investigation into this. I accept what you're saying, Councillor Connolly, in terms of looking at our policies and procedures and making sure that they're robust. I think a point, and pardon my naivety, I'm new to this still, but this is quite a high risk project. I don't recall seeing it on the corporate risk register at the top of the list. So for this kind of represents for me, maybe there are some issues with our risk management processes that we just need to have a look at and be assured. We're the committee that is providing the assurance. We need to be assured. Given how long things seem to take to scope out things and agree what what goes into an investigation, what doesn't, personally, I would be proposing that we start to scope out and get ready to actually have an investigation. And by the time that the legalities and the process that monitoring officer is describing to us, by the time that's complete, we would then be ready to go with an investigation if we'd already scoped it out. But I think this is how we've kind of, I don't want to say this but it feels like we've been kept in the dark, and that's very concerning, particularly as regeneration is such an important part of our work, and reassuring residents that we are doing that correctly is another aspect of it.
Okay,
What were you seconding?
Seconds what that proposal, if that is a proposal.
What?
What propose what?
That we scope out what an investigation might look like, so that when the legal process that the monitoring officer is describing, when that's complete, we're ready to go. We have an action plan, rather than if we're just like kicking the can really a bit further down the forward plan. If we think it does need to be on our agenda, absolutely, but I think given how pressing this is and the amount of coverage that it's received in the press, I think we need to be sending a message back to residents that this has happened and we're now going to deal with it, and we need to be reassuring them and putting things in place to make sure it's not going to happen again.
Okay.
So that's my proposal.
Okay. I am as concerned, even more concerned than the two ladies over there about this, because it is, as I said already, a big ticket price item. But it occurs to me it's a bit like there's a fire at a house and the fire is still burning, and you ask the fire people what caused the fire. This matter hasn't come to a conclusion yet, and to ask for an investigation now when the loss adjusters haven't even really started doing any work on this is premature. We do need to learn from this, and it's something that we need to get to the bottom of. Councillor Tarling, I think you indicated.
Yeah, it's a point of order. I was just holding off doing a point of order here, but we've had a proposal from Councillor Connolly which is yet to be seconded. We've now had what sounds like a second proposal from Councillor Phipps, which sounds like it's been seconded from Councillor Armstrong, but we can't have two proposals on the table.
It's the other way around.
Was it the other way around?
Yeah.
Okay, I was still waiting to hear somebody second Councillor Connolly's thing, which I was happy to second if we got there. So sorry, Chair. Can we pull
I'm
this
being
back
advised by Democratic Services that once there is one proposal on the table, that has to be dealt with first.
Chair, just to be clear, my understanding is Councillor Connolly moved a recommendation. I don't think at any point a seconder was sought for that move. So you might have wanted to have done that first and then that be debated before another move was made and seconded. I'm happy to be corrected. But that would be my view.
Councillor Tully.
Yeah, if it gets you out of the hole, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to second Councillor Connolly's proposal that we set up a review in A and G. I'm expecting to hear an amendment very soon now. Thank you.
Firstly, Chair, I would like to be very clear on what the move is from Councillor Connolly, please. So I would like some precise wording, bearing in mind that we have discussed the precise wording at recent meetings.
It could be that Councillor Armstrong and Phipps could accept what Councillor Connolly was proposing as something that you could support. So, Councillor Connolly, can you be more precise on what you were proposing?
That A&G consider on the or include on the work plan for the coming year a investigation into the council's governance and processes around regeneration projects, with a specific focus on lessons to be learnt from Carter's Quay. How about that?
Councillor Phipps, will you be second?
Make a point. I just making the point. I don't know what the answer is, but that's why I'm making the point really. That when your Councillor Armstrong's proposal was made, and then I seconded it, that proposal, your proposal, actually, Councillor Collins' proposal, didn't actually have a seconder at that time. I'm just looking at the procedure. So was that a valid proposal? Because it didn't actually have a seconder at the time, that's all.
It was remiss of me not to particularly ask for a seconder at that time. But what I would like you to understand that we can put it to the vote, and if people want to do that, we can. But as I say, the monitoring officer has advised against it, doing an investigation now, when the negotiations haven't with the loss adjusters even started.
The point that I was trying to make was that we get ready to have one, that we anticipate having an investigation, and that we scope that out as a piece of work that we do now, or as soon as, whilst the monitoring officer is overseeing the legal and that process is coming to an end. I think also it links in with what Councillor Connolly is saying about reviewing our policies as a whole in terms of looking at regeneration. It's
essentially that is what Councillor Connolly is asking us to do. It's the same. Councillor Connolly.
I don't think we're very far apart in terms of what we want to happen. The attraction of my proposal is that we can get it on the agenda and get on with it at whatever stage things have got to with Carter's Quay and the insolvency practitioners. I think that the danger of your proposal is that we'd have to wait for that to come to a conclusion before doing it, whereas with mine we can get on with it and summarise any lessons learnt wherever it's got to. So it would maybe be helpful to talk a little bit about what's different in the two proposals.
Okay.
What would you mean by that investigation that wouldn't be covered by the lessons learnt aspect?
I've got Councillor Cox who has indicated to speak, but actually Graham Farrett, the Chief Executive, indicating online. So Graham, can we have some advice from you, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So I was just listening to the debate and just trying to see if we can find a way to help you through it, to solve it. And I'm just wondering whether we could just bring you a written update on where we are with Carter's Quay and what's happened. And there, on the back of that, you could then decide what else do you want and what aspects do you particularly want to cover, either for Carter's Quay specifically or more generally on regeneration projects. So in a sense, you haven't got all the information in front of you. We could just pull it all into one place. This is the process. This is what happened. This was the decision making. This is where we got to. You might then decide to look further at those questions that Councillor Bartlett has asked about culture, etc. You might look at the technicality of this particular issue. You might look at the contractual arrangements, but at least that would give you a bit of clarity about where we are now and which bits you might want to look at further. would that be helpful, I think, is my question, rather than making a resolution one way or the other without that information being in front of you?
I think it would be very useful to have some more information. We've heard from Councillor Bartlett, but obviously that there is more information emerging. And as you say, Councillor Tarling indicated next.
Yeah, obviously hearing what may well be, if you've accepted it, Chair, that we've got a proposal that's been proposed and seconded, and if there's an amendment coming, I have a suggestion to the what sounds like going to be the amendment coming is that we refer an element of this back to overview and scrutiny, and that is to collate the evidence related to Carter's Quay, to investigate it, interrogate it, then report that back again to A&G, and we'll incorporate that into the review of governance. So it's a bit of a tennis match. I appreciate it, but it takes on board what Councillor Phipps and Armstrong have just said, but putting a sequence in there so that overview and scrutiny, which is their role, can receive this information that Mr. Farrett has referred to, perhaps even answer the question I had about the charge and the value of the property, and that we have cover and that the risk has been reviewed appropriately, so we know what the exposure is. And then, because it's not the job of this committee to do that level of work, we are audit and governance, which, as Councillor Connolly just said, it's a looking backwards, looking over, checking from a very sort of high level type thing. ONS is very much more bit of a bruiser, aren't you, Councillor Bartlett? Get in there and scrap it. So I'm thinking that might be a great role.
I'm going to take two more speakers, and we go to the vote on the one that's on the table. So Sam Acton, one of our independent members.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bartlett.
Sorry, can we have quiet while Sam's speaking, please?
Councillor Bartlett, thank you so much for sharing that information with us this evening. I always find you a reliable researcher. I think Councillor Tarley may have just bailed me out slightly. As an independent member, I read the papers that I'm sent, and on the basis of the zero information that was sent to us, I have not been able to participate in this conversation. I haven't been around since last century. And yes, I could look on social media and find bits and pieces, but it is not sufficient for me to be able to contribute to this discussion and advise you what a member of the public might think or see as fit as the way forward on this. And I just wanted to share that with you. I don't think it's reasonable to just fully endorse this on off the cuff. More information is required, and that doesn't mean that investigation shouldn't take place in the future, but it sounds to me as though it's going to compromise the council really badly if it happens right now, and we need to have more information to make an informed decision, and I'd appreciate being informed first. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cox, who's the portfolio holder for finance.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to welcome the appointment of the lawyer insolvency specialist, which is what I actually asked for in the first place, and I'm delighted that it's actually happening. But I would be concerned that any investigation that did happen might compromise them in terms of what work they're doing on our behalf. So I would a bit like the independent member, I would advise caution in terms of what you do, because there will be serious negotiations happening, and they are very sensitive, and I don't want us to accidentally do anything that might compromise the council.
Okay, we've got a proposal and something seconded on the table. Can we just be clear what Councillor Armstrong's proposal is, so we can go and vote on it?
Sorry. So Councillor Colley's now proposed. So we had a proposal from Councillor Connolly. There wasn't a seconder. Then I proposed, and then Councillor Phipps seconded. I'm just confused about
Councillor
the process.
Armstrong, I'm supporting you with your proposal, and Councillor Phipps seconded it, but I need to know the.
No, because we have to deal with.
Chair, can I it would help if I just clarify. So Councillor Connolly made a move. We didn't at that point seek a seconder, and we should have before going into a discussion. During the discussion, Councillor Armstrong made a move, which was seconded by Councillor Phipps. However, my advice is that we need to go back to Councillor Connolly's original move that has now been seconded by Councillor Tarling. You're now discussing that. You're able to submit an amendment to that if you want to. Ultimately, there will be a vote on that. You can now make another. You can then make another move.
I'm seeing the monitoring officer nodding in agreement with your advice, Jill. So can I have read back, because I think you have written it down, Councillor Connolly's proposal.
So Councillor Connolly's move is that the Audit and Governance Committee include on their work plan for 2025-26 an investigation into the Council's governance and processes around regeneration projects with a specific focus on lessons to be learned from the Carter's Quay development. That was seconded by Councillor Tarling.
And you are able to put forward an amendment to that, Councillor Armstrong?
Yes, I would like to put in an amendment just to. I'm supportive, absolutely, of what you're saying, Councillor Connolly. I just want to make sure what safeguards we can put in place to make sure that this isn't going to be kicked down the road, that this is going to be a priority for us to be able to provide that assurance to our residents, and that we're in agreement that there is to be an investigation, that not compromising the legal process that is going on, but that we begin to pull together and to scope out what do we want to get out of that investigate, what does it need to do, who needs to be involved, things like that, that we're ready to go. So as soon as the coast is clear, we can go ahead with that and not wait like months for us to start pulling that together. I'm very mindful of the urgency to be able to demonstrate to people and not just demonstrating to our residents, but managing our finances prudently and ensuring that we don't find ourselves in this situation again.
So in a few words, what is the amendment?
Chair,
I've got an idea.
Good.
Councillor Phipps?
Can we remove the words lessons to be learned, please? I hear it so much and it means nothing at all, because it just comes up every single time. Whether you can just get that out of there, that'd be fine. But I'm in agreement with what you're saying as an amendment. Thank you.
Okay, can I propose an amendment to my original proposal then? I think lessons learned is useful, to be honest, because I think an investigation into Carter's Quay is just too wide, and it's unclear, by who. Is it by officers? Is it by us? Is it by external? If we keep it focused to I'm happy to think about some other word than lessons learned, but with a particular focus on ensuring let me have a think about that. But I was going to suggest as an extra clause that we asked for an update on the current to Graham Farron's point, an update on current ongoing work on this, along with the discussion of our corporate risk register at the next meeting. So we can do like an update as the chief executive offered soon, but then in the work plan is a bigger thing.
What I would say, to give Councillor Armstrong some reassurance as to how things are now, and I would refer back to the meeting we had on Tuesday where we had to refer something to full council, reference some borrowing, reference Hawkwood Road, and that's because the administration of which Councillor Cox is the finance portfolio holder has brought in new procedures, far tighter procedures, reference getting loans and things like that. So when you say lessons learned and everything like that, things have been implemented.
Just say focus on Carter's Quay development. Sorry, we could just say with a focus on the Carter's Quay development, and maybe that would be a little bit wider than lessons learned, but hopefully officers will understand what we want by that.
So, Jill,
Just to be clear, then,
just to be clear, what we're all going to be voting on.
the
in a
move
few
is now
minutes.
that audit and governance include on their work plan for 2025-26 an investigation into the council's governance and processes around regeneration projects with focus on the Carter's Quay development.
And that we receive an update on ongoing work with Carter's Quay development at the next discussion of the corporate risk register.
Are you happy to?
Yeah, happy to agree to that. Second.
Thank you. Councillor Beezy, did you want to? Councillor Beezy, what has been over for ages?
Councillor Beesley, sorry, I missed you out. Apologies.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, we've been through a proposal and 2 amendments, so I've been patient for a reason. I've listened carefully to what the Chief Executive had to say in supplementing what the monitoring officer had to say. And I have some concerns within this, which I think we need to flesh out before we vote on anything. And principally, it comes back to the points being made by Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Phipps about the timescale for all of this. I've been around local government for long enough to know that there is a high degree of probability that the time will extend far further than anybody anticipates this evening, for whatever reason, and that actually by the time we get to doing any work on this or making any decisions or recommendations, that it will be far later than any of us would have hoped for. So I'd like to ask, the Chief Executive has suggested, I think, an update report or something like that. So in principle, that sounds very comfortable, but it depends whether that is something circulated to councillors within the orbit of the Local Government Act. Therefore, how much detail will we actually receive, or will it be generalisations? When will we receive that? And when will we be able to determine something out of that about what this Audit and Governance Committee want to do to hold the situation properly to account? Now, on our work programme, we have a meeting on the 20th of March, which is when we will be scoping the future places investigation, and I will circulate members with some views of that in advance of that meeting that I hold. But we don't have another meeting after that until the 29th of May. So I can see this whole issue steaming away from us through into the summer and beyond, and we will be powerless to do anything about it. I think the mood of the meeting is very much, Chairman, that we want to make sure that we're properly prepared, notwithstanding the issues that the monitoring officer has raised, but that we're properly prepared to deal with the issues that concern audit and governance at the appropriate time, without actually starting that process whenever that is. And I think if we don't do that, we're failing the ethos of this committee. More importantly, we're failing actually the people we represent. And I think that is absolutely critical to our function. So I need to have some answers to that, Chairman. And I need to be clear in my own mind before I vote. Other members may not, or they may. But before I vote, I need to be really clear about what it is that we are signing up to. Because I anticipate there are some people who may wish that to take longer in order that we start and we stop and we start again. So if I could have an answer to that, Chairman, specifically, then I may have a supplementary question.
Okay. Graham Farrett indicating to speak. Graham?
Thanks, Chairman. I must admit, I was thinking about trying to get a report to the next meeting, just saying these are the decisions that have been taken. This is all the facts behind it. This is where we are. Now, I don't know how much detail we'll be able to go into because of the administration process and the legal advice, but certainly all the decisions that the council has taken and all that we can pull into one place. The committee can see all of that together. And I start from the point of view of, I don't know why we couldn't pull that together in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Well, Councillor Connolly's proposal, I think did actually have that we could have an update, and if that could be emphasised, an update for the next meeting.
Just to be clear, that was as part of the
Yeah.
report on the corporate risk register, so it would be incorporated in that item.
Yeah. So, Mr. Farrett has said that would be possible to bring it to the next meeting. Councillor Beasley, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, Chairman. Well, like the portfolio holder, I'm very pleased to hear that we have engaged insolvency practitioners, because that is a conversation I've had with others in this room privately, asking myself, why on earth hasn't that happened before? And I would have thought that pulling together what the Chief Executive has suggested, I would have thought the work has already been done in terms of their briefing and their remit. I wouldn't think it would take us until the next meeting, which is on the 20th of March. I would have thought that could be turned around very, very quickly. And if it's outside of a meeting of audit and governance, and we're all signed up to the Act, if there's confidential information in there which would imperil the council if it were to be disclosed, then I can't see any reason for that being delayed for what is in fact another month. Because we won't be able to take decisions at the 20th of March that will be enacted immediately. And as I say, there's then another gap of over 2 further months before our following meeting.
Okay. Councillor Tully, one more time, and then we'll read out what's on the table and we'll go to a vote.
Yeah, this is moving quite a fair bit, and I take on board what Councillor Beasley said, and I completely agree with him that the can doesn't want to get kicked too far down the road. I see no problem, and as Mr. Farrett said, what can we issue? Well, if it's under mark of legally privileged and commercially confidential, and it's treated as such by this committee, and if it goes to OSB as well, then I see no issue of us finding out exactly what the brief was to the insolvency practitioner. But obviously, it will be legally privileged information. But we are the council in this room, and we have a responsibility to the full council to actually do that and to find that information. So I do take on board what Councillor Beasley said. Whether it requires a further amendment, I don't know.
As the proposer, Councillor Connolly, then we'll take a vote.
Yeah, I very much agree with Councillor Beasley, which is why my amendment proposed that we get an update at the corporate risk register update, which we get quarterly, to my understanding of our work plan. So I would hope that means that comes promptly. If there is confidential information, I would hope that would be circulated with us out of courtesy by officers when it's ready. So I very much welcome getting additional information than is in the public sooner. But I do think that the public will not be satisfied with us getting comfortable and not much being put in the public domain. So I think we should try and keep as much of it in the public domain and come to our meetings in the normal way as possible.
Jill, can you just read out what is the proposal?
The proposal is
voting on.
So that Audit and Governance include on its work plan for 2025-26 an investigation into the council's governance and processes around regeneration projects with focus on the Carter's Quay development. And secondly, that Audit and Governance ask for an update on current ongoing work on the Carter's Quay development in the next report on the corporate risk register at your next A&G meeting. And I think the feeling of the members is that if anything could be circulated ahead of that, then that would be welcome.
Okay, Councillor Armstrong, then we'll take a vote.
No, it's just to make the point about timescales. Just in that wording that you've just read out, can we be specific about dates? Is that possible? Just can we make our statements a bit smarter?
The next meeting is on the
20th March.
20th of March.
In terms of the second.
About 3 weeks' time.
Is that realistic?
If the executive has said that something can be done for the next meeting, okay. If we can take a vote on that, all those in favour of that proposal, I'll be voting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Yes, okay, you can speak.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an interesting debate and a very complicated answer to a very simple question. And the simple question was, should you carry out an investigation or not? And I'm not quite sure whether you've actually answered that question, but you know, you will have to respond to the ONS board about that. So, you know, the dates, how you approach it, when it's conducted, all those things are ancillary to the main issue. Does it warrant an investigation? And I'm not quite sure that your recommendation actually gives that answer. I think it does, but I look forward to getting your response to our committee. All right, thank you.
What I would say, Councillor, we're not going to start the debate all over again, is that it's just been advised to us that the external lawyer at the Loss of Justice has only just been appointed. They will be reporting back, telling us what our case is, and that will be summarised in the report coming to the next meeting. So we need to move on.
Yes, Chair.
This is getting ridiculous. Sorry.
that was really off-putting.
It's an hour.
No, I think that was part of the what I'm not getting is that have we said we will have an investigation or not? And the point I was trying to make was about getting ready so that we could have one.
Okay, so we can move on to the next item. We've taken a vote. I will have it read out one more time, and then if the word does appear.
So the recommendation, which was agreed unanimously, was that Audit and Governance Committee include on its work plan for 2025-26 an investigation into the Council's governance and processes around regeneration projects with focus on the Carter's Quay development. And then that the Audit and Governance Committee ask for an update on the current ongoing work on the Carter's Quay development as part of the Corporate Risk Register item at the next A&G Committee on the 20th of March.
Thank you for that. Moving on to item 7 on the agenda. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chairman. Just two things, if I may. Could I thank Jill Hollyoak for keeping us on the straight and narrow as far as the processes of committee work is concerned. There is probably nobody in this room who knows those protocols better than Jill, and I'm grateful to her for that. Could I please ask that she circulates what we've agreed to by email as soon as possible, so that we are all absolutely clear what we have unanimously voted for. And could I also ask that the Chief Executive writes to all members of the committee so that we can fully understand and hold accountable that information that's coming through within a timescale that I hope will be somewhat sooner than the next meeting on the 20th of March. I've said what I've said earlier. I know he's taken it on board. I just want to see it acted on.
Okay, here's Councillor Beasley. Right. Item 7, performance management, including business planning, governance and reporting. We're going to receive a presentation this evening on governance and reporting in relation to performance management, including business planning. We've got Isla Reynolds, who's the Director of Marketing, Communications and Policy, joined with Sarah Dean, who's the Director of People and Culture. So without any further ado, I'll pass over to you. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your time this evening. We've also got a couple of other people online just to help us out. So we've got Katie Tompkins, who's Head of Workforce Development, and then Sophie Bradfield, who's our Principal Policy Officer. So we're tag teaming between people and culture and policy, and that's because we really want to demonstrate from the operating model, our corporate strategy, the golden thread that goes all the way through our priorities and objectives at a corporate level down to the individual level, and then how we are kind of overseeing and governing that. There's still some work in progress, so we welcome your feedback, welcome any questions. So I'm going to let Sarah drive for a moment, but I'm going to go through the first little bit about policy. Hopefully a lot of this is familiar, so apologies if I'm teaching stuck eggs, but it should be a refresh. So Sarah, if you can move on to the first slide. This is a reminder of our operating model. So this was part of the corporate strategy. It's what we've moved through transformation. And then the next slide will show you, just zooming in on that top of that rocket, as we like to call it, the cone. So if you can move to the next slide, please.
this shows you our ambitions in terms of linking that corporate strategy through to partnerships and other strategies that we feed into around the region. But I think importantly for this meeting, it's about that link to service plans, possibly team plans, depending on the size of the directorate, because some services are very large, and then to personal objectives. So we're going to take that order as we go through the presentation as well. My next slide actually shows you our performance dashboard, which again I hope you're all familiar with. It's on the website. It's open to the public, but you can go in, have a look at the priorities, look at how we are measuring ourselves against some corporate KPIs. There's lots of KPIs behind that as well, so key performance indicators. But if you haven't had a look at it, I would really encourage you to go and have a look at it, because that's the way we are checking how we are performing against what the ambitions we've set out in the corporate strategy. It's still, these kind of things evolve all the time. So if you look at something or you want more information or you think we're not measuring the right KPI, please do come and tell us. We look at it regularly, we update it regularly. It's what forms part of the quarterly performance report. So that's part of our kind of governance structure, but it's something that we want to keep evolving as we get smarter and better at measuring our performance. On the next slide is a very basic diagram about how we then monitor that. So we have set up a corporate strategy delivery board, which is specifically focused on how we are delivering against that corporate strategy. And what we do is we look at the measures regularly, and then we do some deep dives into specific subjects. And that's often looked at, where are the areas that are performing really well that we might learn things from? Where are the areas that maybe need some help, and what are we doing about it, that are indicating maybe not improving or not reaching the KPIs that we expect? So that's quite a new board. We're still evolving it, but that's what we've set up. CMB obviously inputs into that. DSG, which is the Director Strategy Group, also input into that. And that obviously is something that we report to Cabinet via the quarterly report, and also overview and scrutiny. I think we've been through the performance dashboard with that group as well. So that's our governance structure. And then the next slide shows the service planning. And I think this is the area that we are still working on. So we're looking at introducing a consistent method for service planning. I would say if we look at it candidly, we have inconsistencies as to how service plans are done, the template used, different services like different ways of doing it. And that's a current work at the moment to try and bring people on board with a consistent approach to that. What we do is make sure that the performance indicators in those service plans speak to the corporate ones. So there may be a few more in there, but they speak to the corporate ones, and we review that. What we're also trying to do is make sure that service planning is part of an established organisational cycle of planning, so service planning, that then goes down to your individual objectives, and that happens around this time of year every year. That's quite a new one. We started that last year. We're doing it for the second time this year, but that's the drumbeat of business planning that we do. And then those service plans, that should inform those individual objectives. So everybody in the organisation should be able to look at their objectives, see how it links to their service or team plan, if it's, like I say, if it's a big service, and how that then links up to the corporate strategy. So that golden thread goes all the way through. So that's how the corporate strategy is the umbrella for our individual performance indicators for individuals. And that's what I'm going to hand over to Sarah and Katie to take you through then how we manage that individual performance.
Thanks, Isla. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sarah Dean. I'm the Director for People and Culture. And as Isla said, I'm going to be going through the next part in terms of the individual performance objectives. We're really passionate about this in People and Culture, so we're really delighted to be here tonight to be able to talk to you about the good progress that we've made and the impact that it can have for the organisation. So Isla's done a really good job about starting to explain the golden thread. It's all about the golden thread for us. And what we've been working on is that sort of annual alignment in linking personal objectives to the service planning cycle, as Isla has already said, and how that fits in then with the council's ambitions. So we've introduced a new performance framework which makes sure that managers have clear accountability for making sure that performance conversations are held regularly with all of their colleagues in their service. So we encourage a mid-year performance review. We work to the basis of no surprises, so there should be regular monthly conversations in one-to-ones, but then a mid-year performance review with an indicator of how somebody is kind of working and operating and at what level, and then an end-of-year review with a final performance indicator, which says whether somebody's on track, achieving what they're supposed to, or whether they need a little bit more support in that. And I'll come on to that in a bit more detail on the next slide. We have introduced last year an online system in order for managers to be able to set individual objectives and to be able to record information about the content of the discussions of their one-to-ones. That also includes things like well-being and how people are doing on a personal level, and also to be able to capture notes about their performance reviews and those performance conversations that they're having, both at a mid-year and end-of-year cycle. And there's also opportunity to be able to include regular updates and commentary around how people are getting on with their objectives. So if you're discussing that during your one-to-ones, you can absolutely capture that in the system. And that's absolutely fantastic for us. And that's the thing we're most excited about, because by having the data in the system, it really means that gives us the possibility for the data and insights that we can then get out of the system, and gives us the ability to monitor and really have a much greater understanding about what's going on across the council, how people are doing, who are our high achievers, who's on a performance improvement plan, and where we need to go next, really. We've also introduced a 360 feedback program. So that's what it says on the tin. It's the ability for an individual to get feedback from everybody around them. So their managers, their peers, their colleagues, other stakeholders, people that they're working regularly. That can be both internal and external, so external stakeholders to comment. And it's a really great tool to inform the performance conversation, and to kind of give clear feedback to people on what they're doing well, their areas of strength, and indeed their areas where maybe there could be some improvement and further development is needed. I have personally found that absolutely hugely helpful in the performance conversations I've held with my teams, and indeed the feedback that I've been given from my teams and colleagues. It's really quite insightful. And we have launched our leadership framework. So again, really good tool for setting the standards of expected behaviours for all of our leadership levels, starting with team leaders and supervisors, working all the way up in a tiered approach to through to service managers, heads of service, directors, corporate directors, and to the chief exec. So a really good way of kind of making everybody clear on a leadership level about what's expected from them. And indeed, if you're on a career trajectory, how you can develop yourself in order to improve and develop into the next tier of management if you wish to. We've also developed a new coaching and mentoring framework. We've developed a new app to match coaches with coachees. We're really keen to introduce more coaching, become a learning organisation, and support people in their development. We've now found that we've exhausted all of our coachees. It's been so successful that we're now our coaches. So we're now looking to develop more coaches into the organisation so that we can roll that out further. So in terms of the mid-year and end-of-year performance ratings, we have introduced these 4 categories. So every staff member would be rated against one of these. I don't know if you can see the text on the screen there, but the bottom one, I'll start with the bottom one, that introduces the concept of a minimum performance criteria. So everybody has to meet a minimum performance criteria, and we set out what that is. So for example, as a minimum, all mandatory training needs to have been undertaken. You must have no live disciplinary sanctions on your file or performance warnings. If you are a manager, that you must have completed all of your end of year performance reviews for all of your direct reports. So anybody that is hasn't met that minimum criteria, there is an expectance that they would be perhaps on a performance improvement plan themselves, but that also links to pay. So if you haven't met that minimum criteria, we have reserved the right to withhold incremental progression for those individuals. The rest of the people are rated against building succeeding or exceeding according to the criteria that's set there. We expect most of our colleagues to be at the succeeding level and only the elite few to be exceeding. This is a new concept for BCP. It's new. We didn't have this in any of the preceding councils. So, as I said, it's something we feel really passionate about, making a difference and bringing up, raising the performance and building high performing teams in BCP Council. Because it's new, we're taking our time to embed it. It's a change and a shift in culture, and that takes time. It's not something you can do overnight. So, as Isla said, we're in our sort of first cycle of service planning, personal objectives, having performance conversations, and then rating people. So managers are just finding their way and getting used to having those conversations. Not all managers find that easy. Sometimes they're difficult conversations to tell people that they're only building or that they require improvement. We're learning as we go and embedding this performance framework into our culture and how we do things in BCP Council. And finally, we, on the back of the data and information that we've got in our system that we are using, as I said, we are now able to have data and insights that we can report on, and we can really have greater oversight around how the council is operating and how our workforce is achieving and how we're doing against our objectives and how many of those objectives are contributing to our corporate ambitions and our managers setting the right objectives and all of that kind of stuff. So we are introducing a set of what we're calling moderation dashboards, because we know that it's important to make sure that managers across services are supporting and rating people consistently according to performance outcomes. We know that some people might be more generous than others, and we've got to find our way in terms of feeling that consistency across the organisation. It's also important to moderate for any non-compliance exceptions, so that we are picking up on supporting services where we need to for people that need performance improvements, keeping an eye on where those issues around pay and withholding of increments needs to come into play, as well as just keeping an eye on making sure that there isn't anybody that perhaps should have been perhaps hasn't met the minimum performance criteria, but a manager might have rated them as succeeding, for example. So just asking those questions, understanding where those exceptions need to be applied, and just keeping an eye generally on whether we're going in the right direction. We also, importantly, want to make sure that we're assessing against any potential unconscious bias that might be creeping in through this process, because we're aware that, introducing a system like this could have that result. And as I said, generally just to provide a comprehensive overview of performance across the organisation. So the slides, I know it's a little bit small in terms of the data there. It's just really to show you some examples of the graphs and the data that we can filter and capture to report to our corporate management board, so that they can have a greater oversight around performance and how our workforce is achieving. This is early days for us, this dashboard. We've only recently developed it, so it's yet to come to the corporate management board, but we are very, very close to being able to do that. And our business partners are working away around the directorate management teams to talk about the results and to pick up on any exceptions. So there's much more work to do around performance really into the future, but that's the progress that we've made so far. And as I said, I'm proud of it, because I think it can make a real difference and have a real impact for the council. So thank you. That's it from me. I'll stop sharing my screen so that if there's any questions, we can go to those.
Okay, thank you for that. That's right. So members, questions. I think Councillor Beasley had his hand up first. So Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chairman. My question's regarding the new individual performance framework that we've just been hearing about. And I just wondered, how can we be sure that there'll be a uniformity of the implementation of workforce sanctions for underperformance or breaches of standard expectations? Because I noticed that you mentioned towards the end the issue of unconscious bias. And I'm just concerned that some of these interpretations could be subjective to some degree by managers. And I just wondered what the framework would have in place to prevent that actually not being uniform or indeed being to the detriment of the person being sanctioned.
Who would like to respond?
I'll respond if that's okay. Good evening, Councillor Beasley. It's a really good question, one we've discussed at length with our trade union colleagues. We're obviously concerned to make sure that this process is fair and it's equitable and as consistent as we can make it be around an organisation our size. And that, that's not a small task, is it? So we will be, as I said, scrutinising the data, making sure that we're looking at things like bell curves and that kind of stuff to make sure that there is consistency across the services in terms of, do we have one service that's rating everybody as succeeding or succeeding and nobody in their service at all is sort of building, because that would sort of provoke us to sort of ask questions about whether that was right. Because I think, there would be an expectation that there would be people at all levels across all services. So, that's the beauty of the data really, to allow us to have that oversight and then to use our HR business partners to work with directorate management teams to kind of probe that a little better, understand reasons and issues behind that, and indeed kind of support with further training where needed. I said earlier, didn't I, that sort of recognise that not all managers are comfortable in that space having difficult conversations, and that might be a reason that people are sort of rating people really high because they just don't want to go there and have those awkward conversations. So we're hoping that the data will lead us in that direction and give us that kind of informed way of spotting that kind of stuff so that we can, really get in there and have those conversations. Katie, is there anything that you would like to add to that in addition?
No, I don't think so, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay.
Jim, could I just have a supplementary on the basis of what we've heard from Ms Dean a moment ago? Because there are two extremes in this actually that concern me. You touched on one of them, which is that unintended bias might mean that confrontation wasn't something that a manager wanted to have with one of his or her staff, and would therefore not perhaps use the framework in the way intended. The other extreme, of course, the other way is if a manager were trying to speed up the exit of somebody from the organisation. You've mentioned that it is a very large organisation, and we all know how big that is. Very difficult to keep tabs at every level of management to ensure that there is fairness and uniformity. And it's probably that latter one that concerns me the most, actually, because building up an adverse record against somebody without proper overview from a senior manager to that manager, or indeed further up the chain still, is something which should concern us all. And I just wondered whether you were satisfied within the protocol that that is being properly addressed at every level.
Katie, is that something I can pass to you? Because I know you've had
Sure.
detailed conversations about this. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Yes, so one of the things we're very keen on doing is to create that consistency. But if you look at any performance framework, there's an element of subjectivity, which we have to recognise. We've undertaken quite comprehensive training with our managers. We've got some quite clear guidance about the various levels and descriptors. So what you saw there was just a really quick summary of what we expect at each level. And then hopefully with the data that we're getting through, we get that insight, we can then look and see if there's any anomalies, and the business partners will go out to the directors and have a conversation about those anomalies. So we do feel that there'll be some oversight across it to create that consistency. We did have some discussions originally around force distribution, which a lot of other organisations use, or the bell curve, which means that the next percent have to be at the bottom, more at the middle and less at the top. And we decided we didn't want to take that approach this year because, as Sarah said, what we're trying to do is change the culture, and we want to bring people on a journey with us.
Okay. Councillor Tarn, you indicated next, and then Claire.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we're very interested, Ms Tompkins, on that bell curve thing, and sort of moderation of results and thing is probably what you're looking at. And I think there isn't a system where you don't do some moderation, but it doesn't have to fit a bell curve. You can skew that if you choose to, which I think is the key point. But just firstly, thank you very much. Councillor Slade whispered she loved the four banding. Sorry to steal your thunder, and I rolled my eyes because I've seen it in a couple of big corporates I've worked at before. So yeah, it's all good. I also looked across the room when unconscious bias was raised, because I chuckled when I did my first unconscious bias training, thinking I don't have any unconscious bias, but you would say that anyway because you're unconscious about it. Hence, line managers are subjected now. I use the word subjected to unconscious bias training. I just want to know if that is important. And I put a big star next to the next word, is I've put empowerment as well, is that line managers need to feel empowered to do this, and that culture, and it is a top-down culture, that everybody in the process is empowered, and vice versa. So if you're doing a 360 review, and you're commenting on your line manager's performance, you know, they're also empowered to speak up. And I know we sort of, I don't know if it's actually part of this presentation, but whistleblowing is really the final part on it. But it's really about empowerment. Yes, love the bands, and unconscious bias training for line managers that are conducting reviews, whether that's actually been considered.
Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, Katie, we have rolled out training on unconscious bias. Do you want to do a bit of an update on what we've done so far?
Yes, we've had some guest speakers in, and we've created some toolkits, and we've rolled out we've done quite a bit of work at the beginning of the year around unconscious bias. We've created quite a resource, and as I said, got some interesting speakers in that we've cascaded down, because it is really important, as you said, because most people say I'm not biased and I haven't got unconscious bias until they do the training and then realise that they have. So that's the power of the training.
Okay, thank you for that.
I think.
Councillor Claire Waite, you were next, then Councillor Slade.
Yes, I'm cautious about what you said, Sarah, that you expect to see a range of performance levels in each department, because this isn't really my experience. So if you've got a department which is going really well, you know, your lowest performer might be better than the average or a good performer in a department which is kind of the pits. And this is what happens, like people leave, and you know, it's built about agency workers, high turnover, that kind of thing. So why would you want those parts to be comparable with your high performing teams where you have success, breeding success, etc.? You know, I'm sure I don't need to lecture you about it, but that's my concern with what you said. But I know you've already touched on your position there. I don't know if you want to comment any further on what I've said. I did have another question, which is about coaching, actually. Because I find it quite useful to get sort of outside influences into an organisation, because otherwise people are just talking to themselves quite a lot. So are there opportunities for people to hook up with coaching from neighbouring authorities?
Anybody want to comment on that?
So
yeah, go on, Katie.
Yeah, so at the moment we've got an internal and external coaching pool. The internal coaching pool we're using at the moment, we're trying to expand it. And we also work with our Southwest councils and have a reciprocal coaching arrangement with them.
Okay, thank you. Got Councillor Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just pull up that last slide, the one with the 4 thingamajiggies on it? Because I liked the building. That's the one I particularly liked, actually, because the others are fairly.
That one.
That one. Thank you very much. So just to clarify, on here, as far as I can see, it says BCP Council expects most colleagues to be performing at the level of succeeding. And I'm slightly sort of, I get that, but I equally understand, it's similar to what Councillor Waite was saying about, is, well, if you've got new teams, you would expect them to be building. And so actually I'm a little bit uncomfortable with this sort of expectation that building doesn't necessarily mean you're not doing well, because if you're new in a role or you've recently been promoted, you wouldn't expect anybody to be succeeding in perhaps the first year of their role.
Except you.
No comment. But the other bit that I'm not clear on is, what do you mean by minimum performance criteria? Are you suggesting you have to be succeeding to be at the minimum performance criteria, or is that at building? Because depending on where somebody is in their job timing, minimum performance might be building, but if you're somewhere else, exceeding might be minimum. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. I'll take that. Good evening. The minimum performance criteria isn't about whether you're on building or succeeding or exceeding. It's about whether you've completed your mandatory training, whether you've got a live disciplinary or performance warning, and whether, if you're a manager, you've completed your end of year performance reviews for your teams. So if you haven't done those things, that's the minimum we would expect. If you haven't done those things, you're automatically on requires improvement. And in relation to your first question, I think I speak to Katie as well. I think we would both agree with the comment that you made, that anybody new into role could quite rightly be at building and developing in that team. The comment that I made around is kind of expecting a spread is thinking about our services that have got hundreds and hundreds of colleagues in them. I was trying to give an extreme example of how in a very large service, like environmental services, for example, you wouldn't expect everybody to be at one level, that you would expect there to be a range of people at different levels within that for various reasons, whether that's because they're new, or whether it's because they're not performing at the right level, or whether it's because they're absolute superstars at, role modelling how it should be done. So, yeah, for all different reasons.
Could I come back, Chair?
Of course.
Just to say, perhaps I'm too tough, but isn't just to not be in a disciplinary and have completed your mandatory training a bit of a low bar for getting an automatic increment in your salary? Because I don't know any other organisation where you'd get an automatic increment just for not being horrendous. Because, I mean, it's not difficult. Mandatory training is mandatory training, right? If you don't do it, you've broken everything anyway. And if you're not on a disciplinary, that doesn't mean you're doing okay. So I'm just slightly uncomfortable with this idea that from the public's perception, you're going to get a pay increment just for not being on a disciplinary.
Who wants to come back on that?
I very much see your point, Councillor Slade. I think what I would say is what I said earlier, that we're on a journey with this, and to take you back to where we were with the legacy councils, in that we had no framework. We didn't have a culture of managers regularly undertaking performance conversations, maybe not even one-to-ones, and we got quite a shift in the culture, and this does not mean that we cannot take this further. We cannot, change the criteria at some later date. I also kind of need to be mindful that where we are in our situation as a council at the moment in our negotiations with the trade unions on the issues relating to pay and reward, and the issue of performance and withholding increments is quite a sensitive one for the trade unions, particularly in light of where we are. And so we have spent a long time discussing this performance framework for all of the reasons you've all the questions you've just asked around making sure that we are offering consistency, that nobody is being penalised for something they shouldn't be, or that unconscious bias, or any of the above. So I think that sort of tells our story in terms of where we are, but that's not to say that I don't see and accept the point that you're making. But we need to embed this, and we're making a start, and we're building this for the future.
Okay, thank you. Next person I've got is one of our independent members who's joining us online. Lindy van Vuren, your turn.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted a little bit more information on the moderation. Will you be having a moderation committee? Who will be on the committee, and the frequency of meetings, and what will the committee be looking at? I'm asking these questions because I used to sit on a moderation committee, and it used to take sometimes a whole day to do the moderation, even in a small entity. So have you thought about streamlining the processes? Just a little bit more information, and maybe I can give some advice from our experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie, could I pass that one to you?
Yes. My background as well is in the private sector as well as the public sector, where we did do performance related pay, and we did do quite comprehensive balanced scorecard and moderation meetings. And this year we've decided to take a bit more of a lighter approach in terms of the moderation. So we will be doing moderation. We will be looking at results. But as this is our first year, it's more of a light touch approach. So the business partners will be going out to the directorates and having those conversations. And then we'll bring it back to CMB to look at the overall picture of what the data is telling us. But as Sarah said, we can build on it for next year if that's the appetite for the organisation to do so.
Thank you. Do you want to come back, Lindy? Or is it something that you could perhaps talk to our officers offline, perhaps, in the next couple of days?
Yes, I'm willing to talk offline.
Yeah, it might be useful, Sarah, or one of you could email Lindy and make contact, so she knows. If there's four of you, then she may not have jotted out all the names. Okay, thank you for that. The other name of the next person I got is Councillor Sarah Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I'm really passionate about empowering people to excel and deliver, but I'm just wondering about how this new framework, how does it fit and be applied within departments where there might be staff shortages, there might be other issues and pressures going on for staff, changing life circumstances, all manner of things that might affect their performance, but it might not actually be about their ability or, mental capacity to do a job. And also kind of following on from that, how do we prevent burnout? Looking at where people might be aiming for and what they might have to go through to get to that level. What support are we putting in place? Thanks.
Is you happy to pick it up?
Yeah, I'll try and answer it. Yeah. So one of the things that's in my team is wellbeing, and I've got a team that's very passionate around wellbeing and having conversations. So as part of our performance framework, we have focused on getting managers to have those conversations about wellbeing, to put in support that those individuals need, when life is getting tough for whatever reason. And obviously, we've got quite a comprehensive wellbeing package, which we regularly communicate and promote. In terms of has that answered your question, or do you want me to go on in terms of how we've have a slight flexible system in terms of across the services for those large groups of staff?
Yeah, that would be helpful to hear a little bit more.
Yeah. So where we've got large groups of staff, in terms of that, we got some feedback from the union saying actually the staff do want to have these conversations. They're really keen to have the conversations. They don't want to not have a conversation with their managers, just to check in to say, how are you doing? You're doing a great job. Is there anything I can do to help you with? Do you want to move further in your career? What do you want to do? So what we want to do is a much more sort of a focus on the positive nature of performance rather than the negative one. So the language we've used and the way that we've communicated has all been around sort of more of a positive conversation, a strength-based conversation, rather than what people tend to focus on is the sort of performance improvement side, which is like, i.e. people aren't performing and we need to do something about that. Obviously, you need to tackle that. I'm not saying you don't, but it's about the language we use to support those individuals that are performing well, which is the majority of staff.
Thank you. And last question, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I'm conscious that on the risk register is recruitment and staff retention. So keen to know if in your work, how your work has been linked with that risk and how joined up that is. And the reason I say that is that I think it's really important. A lot of people say that you don't leave a job, you leave a manager. I think the culture of your direct line manager and how you fit in with your team is so much a part of what it's like working anywhere. So I think it's really important, this point about moderation. I just wanted to come back to that for a minute. A lot of large organisations, in my experience, moderation is a huge part of performance. And in my experience, when a manager gives the performance review, they then have to sit in a meeting with every other manager of their level within the department and justify why they've given that rating, and then other managers who've seen that individual's work can comment, and it's through that sort of peer-to-peer review that you can identify whether someone just isn't sitting right with a team, and that relationship with the manager isn't working out. So it's keen to know how you've linked in with that recruitment and retention risk, and just to flag how important I think that moderation work is, and I hope that expands in future years.
Anybody want to come back on that or not?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, we have a people and culture strategy that we live and breathe by in my team, and we're doing a lot within that to look at the employee experience, and that within that we will focus right on the kind of employee life cycle from when they when they first look for a job to work with BCP to onboarding. And then into their careers and throughout their life cycle, really, with us as an employer. And we're kind of working on data and dashboards again to really get a feel for how our colleagues feel about their experience with us and how they feel as BCP as their employer. So we've got all means of data that we can access to be able to understand that better, like our biannual staff engagement survey. We're just about to go out and do our next one of those in April, and all sorts of other things like sickness absence data, access to the wellbeing support, how people feel about their managers and how they've reported that back through the survey, the 360 feedback, all of the above. There's a lot, a wealth of information out there that sort of feeds us that information about how people feel and how engaged they are in working for BCP Council. So all of that kind of feeds into the talent and retention and all of the issues I think that you've raised.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yes.
Can I build on what Sarah's just said? Because I think as a manager who's doing my end of year reviews at the moment, I think what Sarah's team has done really well is that within that conversation there is, in the form, is a box where you talk about development and ambition. And what I think we sometimes forget in retention conversational data is that not retaining people is a bad thing, and actually it can be a really good thing if they've gone on and developed, and that succession planning. And I think what's really good about this framework and the forms is it's starting to link those threads around having the conversation about where's your next step, how do we get you there, what could that look like, and having an open conversation rather than waiting for somebody to get tired or bored of their job or frustrated, I think it's, in my experience, you're much more likely to retain somebody for an extra year because you're open about their development than not have that conversation. They get, they think there's no opportunity and off they go. So I think Sarah's team's done a brilliant job of making us as managers have that conversation and fill out that box. And also, we've talked a lot about empowering our colleagues to have that conversation with their manager, and it'd be okay to say, actually, I love my job now, but I'd really like to go and do something else, because I think we can all understand that nobody's going to be staying in the same job forever. So those I think this framework, we've talked a lot about negative performance and managing negative performance. I think this framework has, in my experience, we've had really positive conversations. And actually, when you talk about building, often you're building because you're developing in an area, or because we've talked about having things going on in your life elsewhere. You can have a nuanced conversation about building. So I think the framework allows space for a really good conversation. That to me is the key part of this.
Thank you for that, and can I thank you, all four of you, on behalf of the committee for your presentation this evening on performance testing and performance management. I could suggest that there is somebody in America who could benefit from your knowledge about performance testing, and I'm pleased to hear that you didn't send out an email last Friday to all staff asking to report by Mondays to the 5 best things that they're done. And Graham Farrant, over to you to finalise this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. I was only going to, first of all, thank the team for the presentation they've done. I think it's no coincidence that as a council, we've appointed quite a few people internally for internal promotions as we've developed this culture, which is around not just performance management, but also about coaching and developing individuals. But also, just for the councillors to note, that we've produced 3 strong female chief executives for other councils over the last couple of years, and we should be genuinely proud of that, because that is us taking people, helping them to develop their skills and helping them to see their own ability and the opportunities that they have. So my sense is that it's taken a while. It's taken 6 years to try and get the right culture in place. These are some of the core ingredients, and the work that Katie and Sarah have done on the people culture, but also the work that Sophie and I have done on the performance management framework, I think is really coming together. So just wanted to add that and to add my thanks, because I think it's been really strong.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the presentation again. Thank you. Moving on, item 8. Statement of Accounts 2023-24. This report presents the final audited statement of accounts for 23-24. The committee is asked to review and approve the accounts, considering any comments received from Audit and Governance Committee. Before I actually ask the external auditor to present the final audit findings for 23-24, can I draw the committee's attention to the fact that Pete Barber has recently informed us that this will be his penultimate Audit and Governance Committee meeting he'll be attending at BCP Council. As members may be aware, it's good practice that an individual operates as the external auditor for an individual authority for certainly not more than 5 years of accounts. The 23-24 accounts will mark Pete's 4th year with BCP Council. Therefore, Grant Thorntons have taken the opportunity to rotate their senior team, with the result that Barry Morris will become the external auditor on the conclusion of the 23-24 accounts. It would be remiss of me, and on behalf of the whole committee, not to take the opportunity to thank Pete for his wise counsel during those 4 years, and for his help and support to members and officers in addressing some quite significant challenges during that period. And with that introduction, Mr. Barber, over to you. I hope you're not blushing too much.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. Thank you for those kind words. It's been an enjoyable and challenging experience, and today, this evening, marks probably my final main feedback to this committee as those charged with governance. As you say, Chair, it's my penultimate committee. I will be in attendance at the next meeting, and as will my successor to introduce himself as well. But this evening, our attention is on 23-24. So within item 8 of your agenda, you have a number of appendices. one of which is our audit findings report. So there are a number of documents, and these are our main outputs for 23-24, and I will take you through each of those in turn. So the first and most substantive document is our audit findings report for 23-24 that begins on page 25 of your pack. And this document is the key document for setting out our findings and conclusions in respect of our opinion audit for the year. Members of committee will recall that at the previous meeting back in January, I did provide a verbal update indicating that our work was almost complete, but we hadn't quite managed to conclude everything. So it's very pleasing to be here this evening to confirm that, importantly, we did receive our IS 19 pensions letter shortly after committee last month from the auditors of Dorset Pension Fund, and undertook further work in relation to their findings. And we've also completed the other small elements of outstanding work that weren't complete last month, which means, subject to the committee approving the updated statements and signing the letter of representation, I will be in a position to issue our audit opinion tomorrow, in accordance with the backstop deadline, which coincidentally is tomorrow as well. Now, importantly, to bring to members' attention, despite us undertaking a full audit in 23-24 and obtaining assurance over disclosures tested in relation to that particular year, our auditor's report will tomorrow again include a disclaimer of opinion, and this is due to the limitations imposed on the audit assurance as a result of the prior year backstop, and the fact that we don't have assurances over those opening balances. For those that have read the report in detail, you will find the draft version of that proposed audit report that will go into the accounts tomorrow on page 277 of your papers. And that, just to be clear, although in detail, it is the standard wording that we are applying at all backstopped audits. So my reflection on the audit year is that despite the disclaimer, this is a positive audit year, and I do believe that members of this committee, as those charged with governance, can take comfort from the fact that there has been a full audit completed in the year, and I do think that this provides a good platform to bring forward the timeliness of the audit process in future years, and ultimately regain that full assurance given the prior year backstop. Just to provide a bit of context, public sector audit appointments in their last quarterly report did consult councils and auditors as to the likely outcome in relation to 23-24, and I think at that juncture, I think it was just over half of councils were anticipating some form of backstopped qualification opinion, and obviously really this report and all the detail within it should be read in that context. So I'll just run through the main findings, Chair, if I may. I am joined on the call this evening by my colleague Adams Azabila, and Adams is the in-charge auditor for the year and has been heavily involved in the audit. And should there be any questions, no doubt Adams will help me with those in terms of a comprehensive response. And in terms of the findings, we did identify a number of material errors in the draft accounts presented to audit. These have been corrected in the final version of the statements. And once again, there were a number of non-material errors and adjustments, the majority of which actually, as with previous years, related to property valuations, as well as some classifications of income and expenditure. So all the detailed changes to the accounts, to the final version you have in front of you, are set out on Appendix D. And I think it's probably important also to say that whilst there were a lot of changes to the accounts, none of those changes impacted on the council's outturn position and usable reserves for the year. As with prior years as well, it's been a very involved process. The council and ourselves have invested significant time to complete this audit. This reflects many of the challenges that I've gone into in previous years. The accounts are incredibly complex at BCP. You've got a number of legacy systems. You also had the added complication for the year in question of the new financial system that has impact on staff availability, and obviously ensuring that the accounts are closed down based on that new system. And obviously, as ever, the bar raises every year in terms of the level of challenge and scepticism we apply in challenging the disclosures in your accounts. So that has once again resulted in extra work over and above planned, and you will see a increase proposed to your fee against the scale fee set out on page 77 of your papers, which as always will be subject to public sector audit appointments approval. The finance team have worked really positively with our team, and I think this has really supported the process. I did mention the new finance system, and whilst that has caused some challenges, I think it has already demonstrated some benefits, and I think those benefits will be even greater in future years when we come to do future years' work. And both our team and the replacement team and we'll be looking to work with your finance team next year to build on that experience. Chair, I'm conscious of time, but I thought, with your permission, I might just run through the significant risks and in the main findings based on our planning risks, the risks that the post-statement stage did not change. But if I briefly run through those.
Could you give us the page number again?
Yeah, I will. Yep, absolutely, Chair. So the first of which is management overrider control. So that's on page 32. So management overrider control is a default significant risk at all audits, not just within the public sector, and it focuses on ensuring we do extra work on those areas of the accounts subject to greatest estimation and uncertainty. It also includes detailed work on journals. So journals are interesting in that should a council or an audited body wish to do so, journals are a really good way of moving money between cost centres and even years. So our work focused a lot on the detailed risk assessment around journals, and importantly, all the journals we looked at, and we did do some extra journals testing given some of the IT control weaknesses that we've reported in here. All the journals tested were deemed to be appropriate. So we have made some recommendations around the internal control weaknesses for improvement, but the journals testing and the estimation areas all proved satisfactory. The second and third areas of significant risk are on page 33 of your papers, and this is revenue and expenditure recognition. Revenue and expenditure recognition are a real focus area for most audits. There is a real incentive, as you can imagine, in some sectors to overstate income and understate expenditure to achieve a desired outcome. That risk is probably slightly lower in the public sector, but there are pressures on your outturn and your performance. But your income is pretty well defined. There's lots of sources of income for the council, but the main areas still are council tax and business rates, and that's very well controlled. So we can rebut revenue recognition, and similarly with the expenditure, that's once again very well defined. So we rebut that as well, which means we can reduce our sample sizes, but rest assured we are testing in some detail, nonetheless, all your revenue that you're accounting for in the accounts and all your expenditure, and generally we are able to gain confidence over those disclosures. So moving on, that then takes me to land and buildings and council dwellings. So this starts on page 33 and goes on for the following 2 pages. So I did mention at the outset that this is the area that tends to be the main area for errors, and once again that proved to be the case. I mean, there's huge numbers at the top of your balance sheet, and we are testing an awful lot, and we are focusing on those areas that are most susceptible to misreporting. And you'll see here that we did identify a number of areas. So we had an academy school that was converted in year that was not removed from the balance sheet. So we had an overstatement of land and buildings of 14 million. We did do further checks to make sure that was an isolated case and there weren't any other academies, but that's been corrected in the revised accounts. We had quite a long discussion with officers and your valuer in relation to land values generally. You had a new valuer for 22-23 that was in place for 23-24, and they applied a standard value per hectare for developed land and undeveloped land. We're of the view that it's a bit more nuanced than that, and depending on planning permissions, location, etc., that you would expect different land values. And that resulted in some revisiting of values, particularly for the BIC, given its location, and using the internal valuer to come up with a revised figure that we were more comfortable with, the management accepted and we concurred with, and that made a further revision to the fixed assets. We also had an issue with assets under construction where they were found to be operational in the year. So they were reclassified, and I think that was just over £4 million, once again corrected. And there were various other errors within that balance at the top of the balance sheet. And if there's one area where I think there needs to be even more focus as part of the close down for 24-25, it would be that quality assurance around the valuation of land and buildings, given the historic errors identified. There was a further work that we did on council dwellings, so we're on to the next page now. Only one difference there of £1.4 million due to the financial statements lifting up a value from a wrong value from the asset listing, and that's been corrected. And then in terms of investment properties, and I'm just moving down now to page 36, an error within the Dolphin Centre where there was the incorrect rental yield that was a further revision of £2.7 million. So that was the main assets at the top of the balance sheet. At the bottom of your balance sheet, you have this pension liability, and you'll be aware that the main reason why we backstopped the 22-23 audit was because of the lack of a letter of assurance from the pension fund auditors. As I said earlier, we did get that. As is the case most years, the auditors did identify a small error in the asset base within the pension fund, so it was understated by 2.6 million. The council's share of that was less than £1 million. Historically, you haven't adjusted for that, and we're comfortable that you don't do that again this year, given the sizes involved. Interestingly, we did know from prior years that there had often been an issue with the actuary not being asked to provide IAS 19 calculations for Tricoro, and that should be in there. We double checked and found out that wasn't included. The council reran that report, and that resulted in a movement of 1 million the other way, so that interestingly the two figures almost netted off completely, which reconfirms the basis for not making any changes to the accounts. And then the final area, you'll be pleased to know, in relation to significant risks was the new system. So this is on page 38. We were pretty comfortable with this. We got our IT colleagues in to look at this and the data migration. We didn't identify any deficiencies. We were aware that there were some teething problems when it was first introduced in terms of the business operations and day-to-day runnings, but then that's not unusual with such a large change. And whilst we have made some IT control recommendations in the report, we were pretty comfortable with that as well. And I suppose just for completeness, the only other thing probably worth bringing to your attention is on page 52, which was the Russell Coates Museum valuation, where the auditors of that charity challenged the valuation, which has historically been done based on insurance valuations. They thought there might be a better way of doing it, and it was rerun and based on what we call depreciated replacement cost, and that reduced the valuation quite significantly by £25 million. We asked management to reflect whether that should be reflected in the group accounts, which they thought it would be. We were a little bit sceptical on this, but we did go back to our own valuer and they were reasonably comfortable with that. So that did result in a reduction, quite a significant one, in the group accounts valuation for that particular asset. Just in terms of other observations, just to be clear, we're not in a position to certify closure of the audit, and that's due to a couple of reasons. Firstly, there's a nationwide issue in relation to whole government accounts. The NAO are keeping the option open to ask auditors further questions on any individual set of accounts, and until that's resolved, no auditors are certifying completion of the audit for 23-24. And the other area is, as trailed at the last audit committee, we have received an objection from a member of the public. We've considered that, and our proposed response is currently with public sector audit appointments for review of our response prior to issue. It does need to go through those, but we are satisfied that this does not materially impact on the proposed opinion that we are giving. So that is probably, Chair, all I need to say on the audit findings report. I'll stop there and take any questions before I very briefly, given the time, run through Appendix 2 and 3.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'd like to bring in first actually Councillor Mike Cox, who is the portfolio holder for finance. Have you any comments to make or questions, Councillor Cox?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add to your summary at the beginning, really, to say, I think it was almost an understatement as to how challenging the last 4 years have been during Mr. Barber's time with us. It saw the whole spectrum of our dashboard going red, and that was in no mean way due to his diligence in terms of although I have to say at the time I was complaining it wasn't quick enough and it should have gone redder quicker. I remember having a lively debate with Mr. Barber about the timing. But I'm an auditor myself, so I know how audit is a historical thing. But I was delighted now to see that dashboard is beginning to turn the other way and less red than it was before. I do think Mr. Barber has played a key role in dragging this authority, back from the brink of the financial brink, effectively. And since taking over as portfolio holder for finance, it's really been a pleasure to have such an open and transparent relationship with him. We've had many meetings, regular meetings, and so I just wanted to personally thank him for that. I think it's been a really good relationship. So. In terms of what he said, I think there's two things I wanted just to pick up on. One is the, in reverse order, almost the new system. I think it's a great achievement that from what has been reported, that we've come out so well. New systems were usually a nightmare, particularly in an organisation so complex. I think it's been an amazing achievement that we've come this far and we've got such a virtually clean report from that, and so I'm really pleased, and I want to thank the Director of Finance for that as well. And his team. But the other thing which is less welcome, I suppose, is the business about the land and assets, which I sort of have to say I'm slightly depressed, because it seems to be every year that we get something to do with land and assets, and maybe we need to do a deeper dive in that respect to see how we're managing these assets and how we're reporting them. So I think that's something that maybe this committee might want to. I know it's already taken on a big piece of work, so I don't want to load it, but maybe land and assets it should be looked at.
Thank you for that. As some people know, as a chartered surveyor myself, I'm entering my 50th year of doing valuations. I have come across people using insurance valuation figures for their asset valuation, but I do know how those figures are calculated, and I would definitely support the DRC method that Grant Thornton referred us to as being the more applicable one. Have any other members got any comments or questions for Mr. Barber? Councillor Beasley.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I've got two, but could I just preface them by wishing Mr. Barber well in whichever part of Grant Thornton he's going to be moving to, and to thank him for the way that he always engaged I was chair of audit and governance for 4 years. I think, Mr. Barber, you came in fairly soon after that change, and I always found it somewhat challenging occasionally to try and steer between the administration and the external auditors. That's always a challenge, but I always found you extremely helpful, understanding and positive about how we could get through whatever the challenges were. So I thank you for that. My two questions, I think, are around, firstly, page 37 and the Dorset County Pension Fund. And I see from here that the understatement of the fund's assets at 31st of March 2024 of £2.6 million. I suspect it is around certain asset classes and their valuation within the fund. And I just wondered, particularly given that Grant Thornton will be auditors for Dorset Council as well in the future, whether there is any way of trying to make sure that this doesn't come completely after the event and thereby hold up BCP Council's audit, because I do think there's potential in there for perhaps closer working to prevent that happening again. Would you like to answer that one? I'll come back to my second question in a moment.
Yeah. Thank you. And before I do that, I'll thank you, Councillor Beasley, and also Councillor Cox for those comments. Yes, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Beasley. We are the appointed auditors, Grant Thornton, for both Dorset Council and Dorset Pension Fund, with effect from 23-24. So this is our first year, and it would be inappropriate for me to comment on the way that audit has gone. That would be for my colleagues to communicate to the pension fund and the council. Rest assured that the fact that we've got the IAS 19 letter of assurance in time to be able to review it, challenge it, and conclude ahead of the backstop deadline is comforting. Clearly, a February receipt of that letter, I would absolutely prefer to have it earlier than that. I am conscious that the backstop deadline is the end of February again next year, but no doubt my successor and the Section 151 officer and finance team would want to bring the target completion date for the audit for 24/5 forward. And I alluded to that in my introduction. So having a first year audit is always very difficult. So I am confident that having got through 23-24 as year one of the audit, first year of Grant Thornton, that my colleagues will be working tirelessly with both the council and the pension fund to ensure that letter is forthcoming at an earlier stage of the audit than this year. And I think that would play well into, both ours and yours desires to get the audit process refined so that it is less time consuming for both parties.
Chairman, my second point, and I thank Mr. Barber for his answer a moment ago. Could I take us back to page 34 and the second bullet point, where you identified the valuer, that's the council's valuer, applying one land value to developed land and one land value to non-developed land in a fairly arbitrary across the board way, and I appreciate why you may have had issues with that. My question actually is about how that has affected the external auditor's position in previous years, because presumably you would have raised, had there been similar issues in previous years, you would have raised them at that time. So is it solely around there being a different valuer and a different methodology to that valuation, or is there something else we should know?
No, you're absolutely right. So in prior years, and if we look back to the last full year of audit, which was 21-22, you had a different management expert, you had a different valuer that you used, that did use different values per hectare for different pieces of land, dependent on use, planning permissions, location, etc. This was the first time that we've come across this issue of a standard average land value, land values, because there was one for use for developed land and one for undeveloped at the council. And it was unusual. I'd not come across it before many other councils, so hence the challenge, and hence the revision to the one asset, the BIC, given it is a bit of a unique asset in terms of, and not least given its location. We were comfortable that revision upwards was appropriate, and we also recognise that actually a lot of the other assets, they were similar in terms of schools, etc., which were a bit more homogenous in terms of their usage and potential value, and we were able to get comfortable enough in terms of the range of values provided by the valuer in terms of land values in totality.
Councillor Colway.
Thank you. My question's about the effect of the backstopped years, because you mentioned because you couldn't wholly rely on the opening values, that requires a disclaimer on this year. But how long does that follow you around for? When do we get to a point? I mean, I read something about 5-year rolling. Is it going to be the whole next 5 years that we're going to have this disclaimer?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and a question we've been asked at lots of councils. So there are a number of years that need to unwind on things like reserves and balances. You've picked up, I think, on probably one of the key factors, which is the land and buildings, the property, plants and equipment at the top of the balance sheet, where the requirement under the code is that all land and buildings are revalued as a minimum every 5 years. And obviously, if you've got a backstopped audit where there's no assurance, then the logic is it could take another 3 or 4 years for that to unwind. What a number of councils are looking to do is to review the phasing of that cyclical approach. You do have to do every single asset every 5 years, but by selecting some of the larger value assets earlier on in the process and ensuring that they've been valued and subject to an audit, potentially could offer the opportunity to bring that assurance that the auditors can gain over a shorter period of time than 5 years. But it's also fair to say, I think, in addition to that there is still a discussion within the sector, and auditors are still in discussion with the FRC about the extent to work that they will need to do in future years in terms of prior year audits that have been backstopped to get that totality of assurance. And we are awaiting further clarification on that as to what additional work we want to do in future years in terms of that 1 year that we didn't audit to get that assurance. So I cannot give you a definitive answer, but there are certain things like the land and buildings that you could adopt a strategy that may assist that assurance being obtained in a shorter period of time. And no doubt my successor will be having discussions with you about that for 24-25.
Very brief follow-up. Could you define FRC terminology that you used? Also, can you remind me, was it just 23-24 that we backstopped?
Sorry, yeah. FRC, Financial Reporting Council, who were the systems leader and who, clearly in terms of the backstop approach, are a key reference point in terms of how that works, in terms of what auditors need to do and don't need to do to be able to give that clean opinion that every council wants. And just in terms of the backstop year, the year that was backstopped was 22-23, and obviously the report you're receiving this evening is in relation to 23-24.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
We do need to formally vote on this, and the recommendation is set out in the agenda. So can I have
You want to speak to Appendix 2?
Sorry?
Sorry, I think Mr. Barber said he was going to speak to Appendix 2. Was that before we vote on it?
Yes.
I might be wrong.
You've got another section to present to us, Mr. Barber. Sorry.
That's absolutely fine, Chair. This shouldn't take long. So for completeness, Appendix 2, which begins on page 85 of your papers, is the final auditor's annual report. This is essentially the same auditor's annual report that was presented some time ago to this committee. I think it was the July committee, where and basically summarises our VFM findings. So, Chair, I wasn't going to go through this because it's the same report. It's just that it remains an interim until I'm in a position to issue my opinion on the accounts. It's no different from the report that you had back in July, apart from the fact that it references the position we're now in relation to the 23-24 accounts. And I am conscious it got a very good airing in July, so I wasn't going to discuss this in any detail given that prior discussion. And Appendix 3, which is on page 143 of your papers, is the letter of representation, which you'll be familiar with from prior years, which is basically a standard letter that we seek from all councils before we sign the opinion, which asks for various disclosures in certain areas. And this is the standard pro forma with an addition in relation to equal pay in there.
Councillor Conley, will come back.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back to the point that Councillor Cox raised about there seems to be a thematic point about land and building valuation. I don't want to spend too long on it, but I wonder what's the best way for us to kind of make sure that we circle back to it at some point as a committee, not necessarily urgently. It's not on the corporate risk register. Don't blame it on Councillor Cox. I was thinking it anyway. I don't see it on the corporate risk register, but perhaps at the next discussion, or maybe the next after that discussion of the corporate risk register, we could have an update on whether or not it would be appropriate to include on there.
Deep breath time. I'm going to be very careful about what I say at this stage, in the sense that I know what the chair does for a living, but what I recognise is valuation is an art, not a science. And I've had a conversation with the finance portfolio holder, and I was half joking when I said, actually, to demonstrate some of the problems that we face in this area, it might be worth, considering a sort of a role play where we ask two valuers to attend, we give them an asset, and we ask them to come up with a valuation. And you're quite right, I suggested they would come up probably with 5 different valuations. It is difficult, it is an art, it isn't a science. So you always do get these discrepancies. Our valuers will clearly be different to the auditor's valuers, and they will have difference of opinions, difference of approaches, how much they look at, how much they don't look at with regards to coming up with a valuation is difficult. Personally, I have issues when they ask us, when we look at Highcliffe Castle, was it lime rendered or was it sand? Sand, And I was thinking, really? You want me to knock holes in it so you can understand what it was actually built from, to help you come up with a valuation? I come back to it's an art, not a science. Please bear that in mind.
Councillor Tarling?
I think we experienced that at Wessex Fields, where we had a very complicated valuation and other factors in it. Obviously, a full valuation or asset management survey, they cost an absolute fortune to conduct. I've worked on those with some very large public bodies before, and the resource worked with a company where we supplied I think it's about 18 chartered surveyors on it to come up with a value for over a year. It's a lot of money to do one, and I think, as Mr. Richards just pointed out, to have a variation on some of the heritage assets as well. What's it worth? Can you sell Russell Coates Museum to somewhere else?
I just bring the chair's attention back to the fact that within this statement of accounts, there was nothing that impacted the financial outturn of the authority. There was nothing that impacted on the usable reserves of the authority. The valuations, clearly there were some significant movements, as there has been in previous years. A lot of that comes down to the art, not the science, and all of that, I think.
Councillor Cox?
Just to spare your blushes, Chair, I have to say, as I always tell clients, if they go to 3 different accountants, they'll get 5 different valuations when they're talking about a company. So it's not just chartered surveyors, it's chartered accountants as well. The I think it's not necessarily what valuation the chartered surveyor comes up with for particular assets. It's what I would like to see is a smoother audit process, and that would involve conversations with the auditors as well as the surveyors as well as BCP to make sure that we're all on the same page and that there's somebody's not going off left field and doing something strange. So I think and looking at it, the problems that we've certainly had over the last few years, there just seems to be slightly disjointed, and that's where problems have arisen. So I just think these are huge asset values in terms of assets, and we should maybe have an agreed process between the auditors, the BCP, and also the valuers that we're employing, so that the auditors are on the same page as BCP.
I would concur. All I would say is local authorities' assets, government assets, are very, very unusual. Schools, museums, bridges, whatever. They're not the sort of thing whereby you can say, oh gosh, go on to Rightmove, one of those sold last week. They are extremely difficult. All valuers valuing the type of assets that local authorities own have a very tricky task. And it's a challenge. It's a job, and as I concur, the same thing would apply with solicitors. You can go around solicitors for advice, and you can probably get 4 different bits of advice. Mr. Barber, I think you've completed your presentation. So are we at a situation that the committee can actually now vote on the recommendation? Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. I will read it out because it is important, this one. It is recommended that A, the committee notes the final 23-24 final audit findings report, Appendix 1, and the final 23-24 auditor's annual value for money report, Appendix 2, and B, the committee gives approval for the chair of A&G committee and the Section 151 officer to sign the statement of responsibilities, letter of representation, Appendix 3, and the statement of accounts 23-24, Appendix 4. So I would actually propose that from the chair. And Councillor Tarley, you're indicating you're willing to second it.
Happy to second, thank you.
So if we could take a formal vote on accepting the accounts, please, I will be voting.
So that's unanimous, Chair.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Mr. Barber, and thank you. And which other local authority are you moving on to now? Do you know yet?
So I'm taking on the West of England Combined Authority. I'm taking on Swindon. So there is a few other movements going on as well. So give me a couple more years, and I'll have probably done most of them in the south of the country. So I'm working my way around them. But very much looking forward to moving on to that. But very much wishing you all the best with my replacement. And as I said, Chair, I'll be in attendance for the next meeting as part of that handover.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. That concludes that particular item. Before we move on to the next item, item 9, I would just ask from the chair: does anybody want a short comfort break, or we go on? We've got no indications for anybody. Item 9, financial regulations, the annual evolution for the financial year 25-26. Mr. Nigel Stannard, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. First of all, I'd just like to make a couple of opening comments relevant to agenda items 9 and 10. And apologies to councillors who have been on the committee for more than 1 year, because you've heard this before. But at the outset of BCP Council, the A&G committee agreed that the policies that this committee agree would be kept up to date via a business as usual annual evolution process, ready for the evolved policy to go live on the 1st of April of the forthcoming new financial year. This approach has resulted in our policies being fit for purpose, responsive to legislative changes, and takes into account and rectifies some of the local issues where the policies have been used in anger, so to speak. This might be in instances of policy ambiguity, loopholes, unintended consequences that the operational use has identified. The annual evolutionary changes are shown in red text throughout the policy document in agenda items 9 and 10, and the red text does stay in the live version of the policy, so users can readily pinpoint where the changes occur and have been actioned. An awareness and communication programme within the council is planned to remind staff of the general approach and the evolutionary changes, and all the evolved policies will replace the old policies on both the council's website and intranet. Please remember too that later on in the municipal year, this committee receives specific update reports on the effectiveness and operation in practice of these policies. So with that general introduction, just moving on to agenda item 9. So a reminder that financial regs is, as well as being a standalone document, is also part 5 of the Constitution. So any agreed changes by this committee go on to council for final approval on the 25th of March, ready for the go live on the 1st of April. So moving into the report, paragraph 8 summarises that parts A to F and part H of financial regs, there are very few and certainly no material changes. There are some minor wording changes here and there. Paragraph 9 explains that there are 3 changes that have been made to Appendix 1 of financial regs, which is the corporate schedule of financial delegations, and happy to take any questions on those if members have those. The most significant changes are in Part G, which is the procurement and contract procedures, and this really reflects the necessary changes required as a result of the Procurement Act regulation reforms. And you may recall that back in September, Stuart Bickle, the interim head of strategic procurement, presented to this committee a bit of a run through of some of those regulatory reforms. Therefore, Part G changes are required and there is limited discretion or choice for BCP Council. I would like to draw your attention to a couple of sections. Section 22E on pages 330 and 331. This is a section where the council has some competition requirement choices on some of the matters between 30,000 and the relevant expenditure threshold, which are different depending on the category of a spend. By category of spend, I mean goods or services, works, concessions, etc. So whilst the council, via the procurement and contract management team, can essentially choose the most appropriate route to market in those categories, the new procurement reforms require us to state, and that's what 22E does, our preferred or expected arrangements, and if we choose then not to follow them for good reason, then those good reasons must be clearly explained in the procurement decision record that accompanies that particular procurement. Excuse me, I've got a froggy throat. So, based on some pre-committee feedback from Sam Acton, our independent member, I'd just like to propose 1 or 2 wording changes as an improvement to what has been drafted. Firstly, standard F on page 324. The words to all entity types and including is proposed to be inserted. So the new sentence reads, ensure that contract opportunities are accessible as possible to all entity types and including small, medium enterprises, voluntary, community, social enterprise suppliers. So that's the first proposal. And then secondly, on the acronyms page on page 340 at the VAT line, insert after the words value added tax at the prevailing rate are relative to relevant, to BCP Council, and this is important because some contracting entities may have a different VAT rate to us. So that concludes my introduction, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Any indications or any questions? Or Sam Acton, yes.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Thank you so much for covering off my two concerns and putting forward the amendments. The final bit, which you haven't covered, which you know about, is in terms of award notification and the communication of the award notification. So this Procurement Act shifts the responsibility for BCP, for all councils, state institutions, to connect to local SMEs regardless of their entity. And the bottom line is those SMEs, local, we want to do business with them, will not understand the council's procurement process. So they will not understand straight off. We cannot assume that they know that a purchase order is needed for the first step. So this needs to be communicated. I understand there is a set of T's and C's. I haven't seen them. I'd quite like to see them to make sure that they are in local business speak, not in state speak, if you like. But the other suggestion that came up in the autumn when I was dealing with the Procurement Act is to propose to make a little video. If you think about like aircraft safety video, it's very simple. That is sent out with the award notification so that if you are awarded the contract, you just press play and you can see first step is you need a purchase order, and then this is what will happen, so that it's really, really clear. People receive information in different ways. It might be audio, it might be visual, it might be written, and it's really important that BCP sees these local small businesses as customers of this information. So I'd really like that to be taken into consideration, please. It is a massive change.
Thank you. I have spoken to the interim head of procurement, Stuart Bickle, on this. He'll certainly look at that on your behalf, Sam Acton, and what his thought process was that it probably needs to be sent at the first to new suppliers, because obviously experienced suppliers know the system now, so to speak. So I think from now to new suppliers, your suggestion's a good one.
Yeah, I thank you, Ms. Acton, for raising that one, because it certainly the local bit is something I've been involved in my current project, working with Suffolk Chamber of Commerce with a local procurement, and actually procuring locally is a very important thing. And I understand the Procurement Act actually enables this where perhaps it didn't before. And it's something I think we would like to do as a council. But as a piece of work, as I've read through it, it's a compliant statement we've got here. But I take on board what you say, and I think it's definitely worthy. I would suggest it's probably at the point at which the level at which you're procuring. You know, for anything over £1 million or so pounds, you'd be looking at a full sort of PQQ, a multi-stage expression of interest all the way through to an award. At which point you would be stating that final award process, and as you said, a purchase order at the end, hopefully, or a contract at the end would be the final bit. Whether that has to be in here or not, I don't know, but it would need to be appropriate for the level of contract which you're sending. Thank you. Otherwise, I think it's a good piece of work.
Do you need to comment, Mr. Stannard, or I'll take another speaker?
No, I don't need to comment. I was just hastily trying to find, because I know I've spoken to Sam about this, and the 22A, we define what we mean by local supplier. So we were ahead of the Procurement Act in that regard. Sorry, I was getting dizzy there. So we've had that in our financial regs for a couple of years now. So we define it by postcode. So we've got BH postcodes, SO postcodes, and can't remember the other one.
DT.
DT. So that's what we define as local suppliers for our purposes of financial regs, and where we expect a supplier from those postcodes to be invited to quote.
Vice Chair?
Just expanding on that, I would really love to be able to circulate more in my community the possibility of bidding for these contracts a little bit more, and how you'd go about it. And it would be great if there was some way of being able to share something about, you know, if you think you might be able to bid, this is how you go about doing it. And yeah, that would be really, that it seems to sort of follow on from that teaching exercise. So yeah, just to comment how useful I think that would be.
Funny enough, I made a video about it with the Crown Business Commissioner in the autumn. I can send you the link, and it tells you all about it and where to find the links as a small business if you want to get involved.
That would be great, thank
Could
you.
you send it to all the committee?
Yeah.
I think we all might be interested.
Yes, I can do that. It's probably slightly out of date now, but it will give you that key information, and it's a start. And I can always speak to the Crown Business Commissioner about making a small up-to-date one, maybe.
That sounds great, and maybe for BCP to sort of have a way of channeling that information for where there is opportunities, and being able to spread that word a bit.
Okay, thank you for that.
Nigel wanted to.
Oh, Nigel, sorry.
Yeah, it is one of the key cornerstones of the procurement reforms, actually, is to make things more accessible. So the government portal's aspiration is you say who you are on there once, and then you've got access to all contract opportunities throughout the country. You could specify regions, you can specify distances from your postcode. So it is designed to definitely try and promote opportunities more widely.
Okay, come back.
Sorry, that was really helpful. One quick question I have. Does this have to go to full council every year? I know you said these policies do, but I'm just thinking in terms of how full the agenda is at full council. Does it have to?
Just this one, just this part,
Just this
because
one.
this is part 5 of the Constitution. So the second set of policies we're looking at don't go to council; they're approved by you.
This one has to. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask Nigel about decommissioning of contracts. So I'm looking at point 34 on page 335, I think it is. I'm just wondering whether in that, you know, where it's got like A, B, C, those are the points, should it have something in there about communication and about managing expectations of beneficiaries of a service, for example, or having to, you know, if a contract is exiting, just how we communicate with the people who were benefiting from that before. Sorry for all the words. I'm starting to feel really tired. But do you get what I mean? Because I'm not reading anything in there that I kind of think of a couple of examples where we decommissioned contracts and there was quite a response in the community. I'm just thinking about how we manage that.
Chair, perhaps on that one, because I'm very conscious that we deliver many different types of contract and many different elements and representatives of our community. Maybe that's one for us to take away and to reflect on in a future evolution as to whether or not, actually having thought on that, we should potentially include something within section 34.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think actually that would be part of tying up with what Lindy's talking about as well, about where there's, sorry, Sam, apologies, where there's a range of organisations potentially taking part in this process. If we're commissioning perhaps with a voluntary sector organisation or a smaller enterprise, or the people who are receiving the service were particularly vulnerable in some way, then maybe that would require some further communication.
One of the slight areas of assurance I can give, so for contracts over 30,000, the strategic procurement team, now called the procurement contract management team, are involved, and therefore they will be making the managers who are running these contracts operationally aware of some of the exactly the things you've been talking about, and some of those other things that are Roman numeral there, so they prepare in the right way for these decommissionings, and it's not just it ends on the 1st of April and that's it, the new one starts. It's much more complex than that, and the procurement contract management team's role is to make sure that we do that in a smooth, orderly fashion.
For that. As somebody said already, this has got to go to full council. So can I have somebody who can recommend the Councillor Tarling? So you recommend it?
I'm happy we propose the recommendation to full council.
Thank you. Councillor Conley, I think indicated you're going to second it. I'll just read it out. It's recommended that the Audit and Governance Committee approve the financial regulations as shown in Appendix A before referral to Council for adoption. The operational go-live date will be the 1st of April 2025. And I'll just read out that covering paragraph. It should be noted, however, that it may be necessary at the discretion of the procurement and contract management team to operationally implement some of the changes from the 24th of Feb 25, which is the new date the legislative requirements go live. And just a query with Mr. Stannard. Obviously, the Appendix A that you're attached to the one going to full council will include that bit of fine-tuning that you referred to earlier, if that could be made sure that goes in. So can we have a formal vote on that? All those in favour of that recommendation to full council?
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mr. Stannard, you're again on for item 10. The annual evolution for the 25-26 financial year of the anti-fraud and corruption policy. I'll leave you to expand on that.
Yeah, I'm going to be really brave here, given the lateness, and not talk too much on this item. I think the exec summary covers exactly what I would want the committee to be aware of, but I would just like to highlight what I'm requesting in recommendations 2 and 3. So recommendation 2 recognises that new legislation, the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, comes into force on the 1st of September 2025. Still a lot of doubt about what that is exactly going to mean for councils. It's a little bit clearer for private sector entities and banks in particular. So what I'm saying there, that it might mean that our anti-fraud and corruption policy may need a new appendix and some other minor changes. And what I propose that I'll bring any updates to the committee in the October counter fraud report that you'll receive from me on this matter. And then similarly on recommendation 3, this recognises that the council's Equalities Impact Assessment Panel are meeting on the 12th of March to consider the changes to the anti-fraud and corruption policy and the whistleblowing policy. And although I'm not expecting any significant changes, if any, but if they do ask for anything, that I'm delegated to implement those changes before the 1st of April implementation date, and then report to you retrospectively.
Okay, thank you for that. Was it Councillor Phipps you indicated, yeah?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question really about the anti-fraud policy and like due diligence, that sort of thing. I'll just give an example. It's an old chestnut of mine, but I'm going to bring it back. Basically, it's what we know now that we didn't know before, I suppose, about to do with the bounce back scheme, because some of the companies now obviously have filed accounts further down the line, and some of those that were given grants, and some of them certainly have gone into administration. And we're all aware of the one that was in my ward, but I did bring to Audit and Governance actually, where they got £70,000, and they've now filed their account, and they've now also gone bust. And it does look as though what they did to get the money, and it doesn't even look as though it's been spent when you look at the accounts, but you know, was a misrepresentation. And I just wonder what due diligence we did then. I don't know what we did then. I don't think they spent it as awarded and then they went bust. And how does this policy now differ from the previous policy that we had at that time? Can this actually happen again? Because it looks as though we gave out money, it didn't go where it should have gone or wasn't spent, and then the company just went and it was basically lost. So it's really about due diligence here and making sure that what is information is given to us is actually correct.
Forgive my slightly robust answer, to this question. So, this committee has looked at that issue several times. You've received reports from the relevant managers. You've received reports confirming several times that the correct government processes were followed, and then that company sent the correct and suitable information in to confirm verification that they were able to spend that money. So the relevance to the anti-fraud and corruption policy, I don't see, if I'm being frank.
Councillor Slade?
Thank you. Can I just, without wishing to challenge you, but just ask a question in a slightly different way? And that is, I remember those times very, very well. And I know that what came out of the whole COVID times was very different. So can I ask then, what assurance do we have that the governance processes that happened under that government scheme are not the processes that BCP operates in funding things that BCP gives grants for? Because my understanding is that was a different time, a different place, a different set of governance. And therefore, if we don't operate like that, we should be assured to say, actually, that can be put to bed, because that's not how BCP grant making works.
Thanks, Councillor Slade, for that question. I think again, the type of grants that were dished out during COVID were pretty unique times. BCP Council doesn't really give out grants in that way. It's a much more controlled process, and there's certainly a lot less of it. At that time, as we all know, we were dishing out millions and millions across many schemes, and BCP Council's grant programme is relatively modest and relatively small, and our processes are robust.
Chair, I'm going to stick my neck out here and perhaps say something perhaps I shouldn't, in the sense that if I recall, and look back at those COVID grants, then actually the level of fraud that potentially occurred was absolutely almost minuscule within the local authorities led grants. That's not necessarily the case with regards to the government led grants. i.e., there is a difference with regards to that level of fraud and things between what was run by the local authorities and what was run nationally. I think I'm right in saying that, but don't hold me to account for that, please.
Councillor Tarling? Oh,
yeah. So Mr. Richardson's saying he didn't lend any money to people he met mates down the pub. Is what you're saying there? Is that right?
Mr. Richards doesn't go to the pub.
Just to confirm, Mr. Richardson doesn't go to the pub, and Mr. Richardson hasn't got any mates either.
Can I bring back Councillor Phipps, because it was your question to start with?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think Councillor Slade actually phrased it probably much better than me. But I just think it doesn't matter whether it's government money or it's our money or it's the council, whatever it is. It should be exactly dealt with in exactly the same way. And we do now have the benefit of hindsight because we can see what actually happened. We didn't in a way, this is being blunt as well, I suppose, and we didn't stop it happening as such, because potentially we may not have necessarily paid as much attention as we should have done to some of those applications. That's just the point I'm making, and I'm just looking at what we've got in front of us now, and if are we working in the same way, and will this policy that we have in front of us stop that type of thing happening?
You're desperate not to say lessons learned, aren't you?
Councillor Cox, you weren't on microphone on that one. Do you want to repeat it?
Yeah, you were desperate to say, you were desperate not to say lessons learned.
Chair, I'll let Nigel reflect on the second part of the question, but just to emphasise, there is currently a COVID inquiry, and they are looking at many different facets of that process, potentially considering what went well, what didn't go well, how we can be better prepared going forward. They are asking questions around both, the local grants systems and the national grant systems, and asking for different perspectives from everybody on actually, what can be better put in place should we ever get into that position again. So, just to give you some reassurance, there is that, lessons learned process.
Councillor Armstrong, are you proposing the recommendation so we can move on?
I just wanted to comment actually and give a bit of feedback, and it is relevant to page 309 of the financial regulations and budget attached to it. I just was absolutely...
That's all that was required under...
That's just amazing, because even to just get a grant of £5,000 as a charity, you have to jump through so many hoops, and there's like so much due diligence that occurs in the voluntary sector in terms of just being able to demonstrate and prove that as an organisation you can hold that grant and deliver it. So again, I think it's just coming back to reassuring our residents that we hear them, that we are doing, that we are not just doing our best, but we're safeguarding, we're custodians of public money, regardless of the source. And I think I was really disappointed to see that of the 109 beneficiaries of this 3 million pot of money, that only 44 of them bothered to write an end of year report as well. So I just wanted to put that on record. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Slade, you going to propose a recommendation?
No, I do need to just respectfully say, please go back and read the papers from the meetings that happened after that, because I recognise you're a new councillor, but please don't think that this wasn't looked into for a very long time, because we did argue about it at the time. Some of us raised really big concerns, particularly about this grant. Myself and Councillor Phipps were particularly angry about it for lots and lots of reasons, and have communicated with lots of residents about it, challenged the leadership at the time, challenged whether or not people should have been on panels. But that's what I was trying to sort of say before, is that was then, that's not how BCP operates now. And I think if I've got that assurance, I don't want to keep going over what happened. It was a horrible time, right? There's a whole load of things that happened over a period of time that we all want to move on from, because this council is building its reputation back, and I think we should be proud of the direction it's going. And I think if we keep dragging it back to a time when it was in a bad place, we are not going to grow from it, and we're not going to build confidence in our organisation and in our place. So I just really hope we don't keep doing that.
I've got the Chief Executive, Graham Farrant. Graham?
Thank you, Chairman. It's only briefly just to confirm what Councillor Slade has just said, actually, and to say that also the department, Bays from government, also looked at this, didn't do a formal audit, but looked at it and said that this would not have been picked out from them. So this particular grant has had as much scrutiny as it was possible to give. I understand the dissatisfaction with it, but in terms of the process and the allocation, I just don't think we can go any further in terms of reviewing it. That has been done by both ourselves and by Bays, at the time. I think their phrase wasn't a formal audit. I'm just trying to find the email now. Can't find it because it was so long ago. But I'm very happy to share that with any councillors if they specifically want it. I know we've shared it with Councillor Phipps on previous occasions and with other councillors.
Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, I'd like to propose that we accept the recommendations as laid out in item 1 to approve the council's anti-fraud policy, and part 2 to approve the delegation to the head of audit and management to amend the anti-fraud corruption policy as appropriate subsequent to the 1st of September Act being enacted, and part 3 to delegate any changes as required as part of the review, the anti-fraud corruption policy, whistleblowing policy, and to be, Equalities Impact Assessment Panel on the 12th of March 2025 to the Head of Audit and Management Assurance.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Connolly, you're seconding it. Yes, thank you. Okay, can we have a show of hands to accept that? I'll be voting.
Thank you, that's unanimous.
Unanimous again. Okay. That concludes the items on the agenda this evening. So check the time. It's just gone 9 o'clock. I will formally close the meeting. Thank you for those who have been watching online. Good evening.